This woman once lived a life of luxury, admired as the perfect noble lady of the empire. Her name was Edele Lancaster, the Duchess of the powerful Lancaster family. From childhood, she was taught that elegance, grace, and obedience were the essence of a noblewoman. She fulfilled every expectation, marrying Duke Lancaster and maintaining her dignity as his devoted wife. But one day, her flawless world collapsed. Her husband, blinded by ambition, led a rebellion against the empire. His forces were crushed, his name erased, and the House of Lancaster fell into ruin. Edele, the once glorious Duchess, was branded the wife of a traitor, and the people who once bowed before her now spat her name with disgust. One night, as one kingdom launched an attack on another, the noble Duchess sat alone in her room, praying softly, "Please, take me into your arms without too much pain." She whispered again, her voice trembling, "Allow me not to waver before pain." And continue to have faith in God's plans and endure. Outside, chaos erupted. Soldiers shouted, "The gate is open. Arrest the traitors." Edele, calm amid the uproar, murmured to herself, "Pain is fleeting, but the fruit of patience will be sweet." Moments later, a commander rushed in as one of the soldiers yelled, "This is the only room remaining." Another barked, "Break down the door." The door burst open, and there she was, a beautiful lady sitting gracefully on a chair, her posture still regal even as the world crumbled around her. The soldiers laughed, one sneering, "Haha, my. So the rumors were true. She really is a beauty. So even in the midst of all this mess, you're still a duchess, is that it?" The commander stepped forward and called out, "Duchess Edele Lancaster." Edele looked up at him, disbelief flickering in her eyes. "Are you going to execute me here?" she asked quietly. He drew his sword and held it to her neck, replying, "No, by the order of the emperor, I will take you alive as a prisoner." Her thoughts screamed, when did it all go wrong? As she sat in that old chair, Edele thought to herself, "Accepting my share of accountability in this old chair, I pondered the honor and pride of a noble. I foolishly endured through everything for such silly things, but I can't even die as I wish." The perfect lady, Edele Lancaster. She hasn't been the Duchess of Lancaster for too long. 3 years ago, memories flooded her mind. She recalled a grand banquet where whispers floated through the air. "Look over there. It's Edele Canyon." Another voice added, "I heard she is engaged to Duke Lancaster." Even if the Lancasters are one of the 4 most prominent families, it's still distasteful. To marry such an old duke, precisely. This year, the duke turned a hush. "Someone might hear you. More importantly, just look at how steadfast she is." Another lady whispered, "My goodness, does this not bother her in the least?" I don't know what she's thinking. Count Canyon's only daughter, Edele Canyon, born to be perfect. There were 4 extraordinarily powerful families in the empire, and Edele, raised and groomed to be married into one of them, had finally fulfilled her purpose. She had lived a year and 8 months as the old duke's wife. Who could have guessed that this perfect lady was nothing more than a means to bind 2 powerful families together? Yet, because of the duke's treasonous plan to declare independence from the empire, she would become the wife of a traitor. The emperor chuckled upon hearing of her capture, his voice dripping with mockery, finally. "The greatest spoils of this war." Duke Lancaster's second wife, Edele Lancaster. Edele's thoughts were bitter and cold. "All my life, I was born and raised for a single purpose. I collapsed where I was standing because I was too afraid to run. I couldn't bear the thought of facing my death on the floor, so I dragged an old chair over to sit, all because of my feudal honor. It may be all I have left, but still, I can't crumble to the very end." Laughter echoed through the hall as one man shouted, "Your Majesty, give the treacherous criminal to me." Another bellowed, "No. I probably took more enemy lives than him. Sir, take pity on this old widower." A woman's voice joined in mockery. "Why don't we decide who gets the prisoner with a duel?" Someone sneered. "I guess no one here has any dignity left." Nobles whispered among themselves, but it's understandable. Edele Lancaster was praised as the perfect lady of nobility. Well, she's nothing more than a slave now. All the more reason not to hold back. Emperor Demarcus Tuberine chuckled and said, My. I almost forgot about the greatest contributor in suppressing the rebellion when he's standing right here. Isn't that right? Tell me, Laszlo, are you not in need of a woman? If you would like, I will give the greatest spoils of war to you. The nobles murmured bitterly. She got married to the wrong man, and now she's ruined. And that commoner, he's thriving, isn't he? He's been made a count, and now this. Why does His Majesty want to endow him, of all people, with the greatest spoils of war? Ideally thought. From what I recall, he used to be a mercenary. Then again, what does that have anything to do with me now? At this point, he's no different to me than any other knight. However, the man who brought me here, Laszlo Chrysis, the master of the Empire's largest mercenary guild, Calliope, and the man who was made count at the young age of 27 because of his military achievements. To the traditional nobles, he is by far the biggest threat among the nouveau riche noblemen on the Emperor's side. However, from what I heard, the nobles who treat mercenaries like delinquents look down on him and treat him like a commoner. Laszlo spoke calmly. I'm not sure. My maids are short-handed, though. The Emperor roared with laughter. Ha ha. Are you saying you want to use the woman who was once a duchess as a maid? Laszlo replied without hesitation. I don't have any other use for her. The Emperor smirked, pleased by the cruelty of it all. Good, very good. I will endow Ideally Lancaster to Count Laszlo Chrysis, who is in need of more maids, and as the hall erupted in laughter, Ideally trembled, her heart turning to ice as she whispered a final, desperate plea, all-powerful Para. Is this what I get for being patient? 3 years ago, in the house of Count Canyon, a storm of voices echoed through the grand halls. Ideally's mother shouted, Ideally Canyon, stop being so stubborn. Do you think you can really defy your father? Ideally hesitated, her voice trembling, but mother, the Duke is even older than father, so how could I marry? Her mother sighed deeply, trying to reason with her daughter. No, there isn't a better suitor out there. He's had a lover for a very long time now, and his children are all grown up. He wouldn't try to sleep with you to have more children. Besides, when he dies, you will be left with all of his assets. Ideally's heart wavered as she whispered, you don't even know when he will die. I would probably be at least 30 by then. Her mother's tone sharpened. You really don't get it, do you? When you become the Duchess, even your father will bow down before you. What is it you don't like about this arrangement? Becoming the Duchess of one of the 4 most prominent families, but Ideally, desperate, turned toward her father and pleaded, Please, father. This isn't what I want. Please reconsider. Yet the decision had already been made. It was a destiny decided long ago. Her father's furious roar filled the room. How dare you? If anything, you should be more actively involved in this family's endeavors. Do you have any idea what kind of humiliation I had to endure so you could marry the Duke? I of all people am doing all this for you, you worthless girl. Or have you forgotten why I raised you? Ideally clenched her fists, her thoughts trembling in silence. I can finally be free from my father, she thought. I can leave the house of Count Canyon. That was the only thought in my mind as I endured everything. I was relieved the Duke was too busy with his lover to lay a finger on me. So I was patient. Despite all the jeering from the people of the Lancaster family, I persisted. I kept dozens and dozens of account books while managing hundreds of staff. And I kept my patience. I entertained guests who visited day after day and hosted endless parties, and I held firm. I didn't slip up once. I kept up the act with a smile on my lips, all for the moment I would finally be free. However, perhaps such efforts were all for nothing. Then, one day, a man came running toward her, shouting, You must run, my lady. Ideally blinked in confusion. What do you? But he cut her off in panic. The Emperor's army is storming this place. Her mind froze as realization dawned. Up until that moment, I had no idea, she thought. I was the only one kept in the dark about Duke Lancaster's plans to declare independence. The plot he hatched without me failed. And I realized something while running down the empty corridors. She dashed through the halls, her breath ragged. I don't see anything. Where did all the staff go? I was the lord that would keep the Emperor's army at bay. The kind of life I longed for was one filled with the warmth of others and supportive validation. But even though I was in charge of all those account books and staff, only one butler bothered to warn me. It turns out I never truly held any part of this large estate in my hands. I became the perfect lady my father always wanted me to be. My life that was praised was nothing but an empty shell. Perhaps all the pain I endured were signs from God telling me to run. Now imprisoned, Idili sat in silence when a guard barked, "Now stay quiet." She lowered her gaze, thinking, who knew something worse than death awaited me. They call me the spoils of war, but in reality, I am nothing more than a slave. They just call me that because slavery has long been abolished. Inside the dark cell, Duke Lancaster's eldest daughter, Lauren Lancaster, shouted bitterly, Are you still acting all high and mighty even now? Well, aren't you the incredible and perfect lady? Her sister, Daria Lancaster, added venomously, she's always been like that from the moment she got married. Her own family sold her off, but she's always acting like she's a real duchess. Count Canyon ratted on everything. I'd bet she helped her father, too. We made you the duchess, you traitor. You ungrateful wench, Idili sighed softly, thinking, it's not the first time they've expressed their disapproval of me, but they've never been so crude before. They're worn out and have completely given up. She spoke gently, her tone calm amidst the chaos. Why don't you get some sleep, Lauren? You too, Daria. Inside, she thought, I don't want to waste my energy on a meaningless exchange of vicious words. Sooner or later, there will come a time when the guards aren't watching closely. When that time comes, I need to have enough energy to kill myself. I would rather die than become someone's plaything. All the Lancaster men have died, and the House of Canyon was able to avert annihilation by giving up on me. Count Chrysis said he would use me as his maid, but a young female prisoner of war will hardly be treated like a human being. Even now, the only reason I'm in a tolerable cell despite being a serious criminal charged with high treason is because I am a gift the Emperor is giving away. It feels like my whole body is screaming in pain. My head aches too. I should sleep for now. I'm sure I'll think of something when I wake up. I have to figure out a way to kill myself. The next morning, sunlight fell across her face. She blinked her eyes and thought, I guess old habits really do die hard. I was completely exhausted, yet I woke up at this hour. Today, I will be handed off to Count Chrysis. No matter what it takes, I have to find an opportunity to die. That means this is the last sunrise I'll ever get to see in this life. It almost seems like this glimmer of sunlight shining through the window of my small cell is bidding me goodbye. The sky is unbelievably beautiful. The final meal they served was relatively lavish for a criminal. Keeping in mind that this is my last meal, I took each bite with a grain of gratitude. A voice soon echoed through the corridor, calling out, Lauren Lancaster. Daria Lancaster. Come on out. Idili Lancaster. Come out. Idili rose slowly, her mind steady. I pray that nothing atrocious happens to those poor girls, she thought. Now there is only one thing I must do, to remain elegant until the moment I die. As the soldiers brought them toward the carriage, she glanced at it and thought carefully, let's jump off the carriage. If the servant doesn't keep too close an eye on me, I might succeed. If his estate is in the neighborhood where other noble estates are located, there'll be many carriages passing by. If I'm lucky, I could die on impact. Hopefully, the servant who is taking me is inept, but when she looked up, her breath caught. Standing beside the carriage, waiting with quiet authority, was Laszlo. Idili rode silently in the carriage, her wrists bound by the weight of her thoughts rather than chains. Sitting across from her was Count Laszlo himself, his presence cold yet steady. She thought to herself, I didn't think he would come to get me himself. He probably came so he could personally keep an eye on me. What if he tries to talk to me? He probably doesn't like me. After all, he was the commander of the Emperor's army. How could he look favorably upon me, the wife of a traitor? Laszlo reached into his cloak and pulled out his red jacket, his sharp eyes glancing toward her trembling hands. Why are you? She stammered, startled. His reply was short and quiet, then stopped shivering. Her eyes widened as she realized, oh, I guess my hands were trembling. That's why he gave me his cloak. She clutched the fabric, feeling the warmth, and a dark thought crossed her mind. If I throw this cloak toward him, would that buy me enough time to jump off this carriage? Yes, once I jump off, I'll be crushed to death by the carriage's wheels. I can do it. Her breath grew shallow as she counted in her mind. I can hear a distant carriage approaching. I'll count to 3, and then I'll open the door to jump off. 1, 2. Before she could move, his deep voice cut through her panic. It'd be better if you didn't do that. She froze. He knows, she thought bitterly. That's why he put me in the same carriage as him. This man will definitely not leave me alone. Soon the carriage slowed to a stop, and Laszlo's voice commanded, "Get off." She looked outside and thought, so this is it. The hell that I will be living in. As she stepped down, her ankle twisted, and she braced for pain, but instead, she felt a firm, gentle hold. She looked up, startled, to find Laszlo supporting her in his arms. I always remember what a noble lady mustn't do, she reminded herself. Keep in mind that acting like you're dizzy to fall into the arms of a man is a cheap and vulgar way to win over his heart. Her cheeks flushed. I'm sorry, she whispered quickly, hoping he wouldn't misunderstand. Laszlo released her without a word and turned toward the castle. Follow me, he ordered curtly. As they entered the grand yet strangely quiet estate, his voice echoed, Head housekeeper. I take it nothing happened at the estate while I was away. Idili blinked. Head housekeeper, she thought, confused. A maid rushed forward, smiling nervously. Welcome back, my lord. Haha, nothing out of the ordinary. Your housekeeper, Marcia, is taking good care of the estate, so please do not worry. Idili frowned inwardly. Why isn't there a butler answering him? She wondered. Laszlo then said calmly, Did you say you were short on maids? Here's a new maid. Use her as you see fit. First, give her a bath, feed her, and give her a room to sleep in. Marcia blinked in shock. What? But Laszlo continued, You can let her use any of the rooms that aren't already occupied. Put her to work starting tomorrow. Idili's heart skipped a beat. He didn't ask her to send me over to his room. He's really using me as a maid. Marcia chuckled dryly. Huh. As short and to the point as ever. Just then, another maid hurried in. Mrs. Bohen, have you heard? Marcia looked up annoyed. What is it, Mina? Mina, breathless with gossip, said, I just heard it from the night outside. That's Duchess Lancaster, who was captured as a prisoner of war. Marcia's eyes widened, then curved into a smirk. Is that so? I can't believe I get to order around a duchess. Mina, do as Lord Chrysis ordered. Show her to the room at the end of the corridor. Mina nodded eagerly. Yes, ma'am. I'm gonna go mull over what to do with Miss Lady over there. Idili followed them quietly to her small room, her thoughts a mixture of disbelief and exhaustion. They're kinder than I expected, she thought. I got a change of clothes, and they even brought my food to my room. So I guess people live in rooms this small. It feels as though everything about this situation is telling me, you're not a noble anymore, she shivered. I'm so cold. I guess they don't let the staff use hot water in this house. From now on, I'll probably have to bathe in cold water even during the winter. How odd. It's not like they would have financial problems. But this house is so shabby considering it belongs to a count. She shook her head. No, let's not think about this anymore. Right now, I have to look at the reality in front of me. I'm more fascinated by the fact that I feel hungry after all that I've been through. She picked up a piece of fruit and took a small bite. It's delicious. Her eyes softened. I thought I would never take another bite of fruit ever again. I was going to give up on my life, but it's not like I thought death was my only option. I just didn't want to live as some plaything, to satisfy filthy desires just because I am a spoil of war. She pressed her hand gently to her chest, whispering to herself, I'm alive. Will I be able to taste fruit again tomorrow? Perhaps Count Chrysis won't try to lay with me tomorrow either. I want to taste the sweet nectar of fruit again and live quietly, fending for myself. Perhaps I could lead a simple life as a maid here. I'll survive and carry on, waiting for the day I can live in peace. While the torches burned low in the Emperor's castle, a servant entered the grand hall and bowed deeply before Emperor Demarcus. Sir Chrysis came to pick up the prisoner himself this evening, he said nervously. Demarcus smirked, swirling the wine in his goblet. I'm sure he did. Tell me, how did he seem to you? Did he look like a man who has been awarded the greatest spoil of war? The servant hesitated. What? I wouldn't know, sir. Demarcus chuckled softly, leaning back on his throne. Everyone else might not know, but I do. I know the true nature of the mercenary king, Laszlo. He signed a contract and joined the conquest at the last minute. He only agreed to the contract for the reward money, yet he and his band of mercenaries achieved more than the knights could ever imagine. The emperor's mind drifted back to the day of that contract, remembering how he had grasped Laszlo's arm and said, "Laszlo, tell me what you want, anything at all." The man had replied in his calm, even tone, "The contract explicitly says how much I am owed." "I do not need anything more." DeMarcus remembered laughing at that arrogance or honesty. Despite having all that power, he murmured to his servant, he has no interest in social authority or status. And to top it all off, the audacity to be so brazen. Why, he would make the perfect dog. But to make him more than a loyal hound, I must lure him with something that would captivate him. Making him a count isn't enough, he smiled to himself. Yes, that encounter took place about 2 years ago, at the victory banquet. The memory flashed, nobles whispering among the glitter of gold and crystal. Did that mercenary really become a count? One hissed. Yes, it's true, another replied in disgust. Surely he would want to be treated as our equal. Just thinking about it makes me queasy. What on earth is His Majesty thinking? DeMarcus had watched from his throne, amusement curling his lips. Though he was the principal driving force behind our victory, he recalled, he was not welcome there. But in that moment, Laszlo definitely had his eyes on Ideally Lancaster. His smirk widened. That is worth a gamble. The die has been cast. Now it's time to watch. His laughter echoed through the empty hall. Brace yourself. I've never lost a bet in gambling. Meanwhile, in the quiet of his manor that night, Count Laszlo sat in his study under the flickering lantern light. Darn that snake of an emperor, he muttered under his breath. What's he after? I didn't expect the Duchess and I to cross paths like this. This is going to give me a bad headache. He leaned back and sighed, his thoughts bitter. The only reason I agreed to the Emperor's offer and accepted the pesky noble title was so my little sister could be married off to a decent family. Maybe I shouldn't have been so greedy. Though I became nobility, since I am of common birth and a mercenary, they will hold me in contempt anyway. It's obvious how my sister will be treated in marriage negotiations. His hand tightened around his cup. From what I've witnessed so far, marriage among nobles is vulgar. A father who sells off his daughter to an old man to make connections with one of the 4 most prominent families. An old duke who already has a lover and grown children, but is still getting remarried. And in these crude negotiations, the lady who was sold off at the highest price, Ideally Lancaster. His mind drifted to her image, calm, beautiful, resigned. Even though she was being married off to that old coot as a second wife, she was still smiling. If she were really against the marriage, she would have run away. Did she exchange her youth for power because of her greed? But why couldn't I take my eyes off of her? It's not like I would ever have the chance to speak with her. Unlike me, who became nobility overnight, she was born into nobility and lived her whole life as a noble. I thought I would never get to see her again. But that very same Ideally Lancaster is now at my house as a maid. He exhaled sharply. That devious emperor. He gave the ex-duchess to me as a warning to those who conspired against him, or something along those lines. If I had refused to take her, she would have been sold off, or she may have killed herself. Those were probably her 2 options. She was found in the Duke's empty castle after everyone else had fled. Count Canyon cut all ties to his own daughter to keep his own neck. Both the Count and the Duke forsook her. She tried to kill herself because of that. Nobles and their pride. I don't get what it is she's trying to protect by throwing her life away. He lifted his lantern, watching the flame flicker, and muttered, but if I keep her around, I might find a use for her. If she could break from her past, her life may not be the worst it could be. He blew out the light, and the room fell into darkness. The next morning, the clatter of basins echoed in the manor's laundry room. Housekeeper Marcia tossed a bundle of worn linens onto the table, her voice sharp. Look here, Duchess. What is this? So I guess the house you're from used dirty old rags like these? Were you too afraid to get your soft hands dirty when you were washing these? Ideally kept her head low and nodded. I'll do better, she said quietly. Marcia sneered. Of course you will. Hey, Salia. Yes, a timid voice answered. Are you sure you trained her properly? Marcia demanded. Don't go easy on this one, and keep a close eye on her. This wench is a traitor from the House of Lancaster, our master captured. Who knows what she might try to cook up? A maid whispered nervously. Are you certain? There won't be any blowback even if you say things like that. Marcia scoffed. What are you afraid of? You think the Duke will come back from the grave for his poor wife? There's nothing to worry about, so treat her however you'd like. Idili's heart ached as she pressed her hand to her chest. Head housekeeper Madame Marcia Bohen, so this is what she meant yesterday. I can't believe I get to order around a duchess. I guess she wants to show everyone how great she is by overpowering a former duchess like myself. She's been like this from the moment she introduced me to the rest of the house staff. Does she want me to break into tears? This is all very unnecessary, because there's probably no one else out there who's happier about the demise of the House of Lancaster. But more importantly, Salia sighed after Marcia left. She's finally gone. I can't believe she has the nerve to speak of the dead like that. Layla, another maid, muttered. Bohen being rude like this isn't anything surprising. We're already busy as it is, so I don't get why she comes to give us a hard time. Idili listened quietly, her mind calm yet weary. Salia is the maid in charge of the laundry room, she thought. Madame Bohen specifically picked her to train me, a former duchess, putting her in an uncomfortable position. If we get picked on again because I didn't do the laundry properly, it would make everyone else's life harder. So let's finish what's in front of me right now. I don't care about being ridiculed. The problem is, I'm not sure I have the stamina to withstand all this work. All of this is possible because I'm alive, so let's just be grateful. Meanwhile, far from there, her father, Count Dustin Canyon, sat in his office, slamming his fist against the desk. Idili, that useless girl, he shouted furiously. She's a worthless, useless excuse for a daughter. His voice echoed through the empty halls, but Idili, miles away, did not hear it. She was too busy scrubbing, enduring, and quietly holding onto the fragile thread of life that fate had left her. The teacup shattered as it struck the flower pot, shards scattering across the polished floor. Dustin Canyon's hand trembled with rage as he glared at the pieces. A man burst into the room, panting, his son, William. Father, what do we do now? Idili has become that mercenary's maid, he blurted. But Dustin cut him off sharply, his voice filled with venom. William, don't mention that worthless girl anymore. The ingrate who doesn't even have the decency to take her own life before she is humiliated. After all I went through to keep this house intact, his voice cracked with both fury and desperation. His mind drifted to that fateful day before the Emperor. Please believe me, Your Highness, he had pleaded, his knees pressed against the cold marble floor. Duke Lancaster blackmailed me into helping him commit treason. He took my daughter, Idili, against my will and kept her hostage, so as a father, how could I refuse him? Emperor D. Marcus had looked down at him, eyes cold, lips curling with disdain. I see. If you insist that the House of Canyon is innocent, then I'm sure you have nothing to say about what becomes of Duchess Idili Lancaster, he had said. Dustin had forced a bitter chuckle through gritted teeth. Why, of course, Your Highness. Once a daughter is married, she is no longer part of the family. She has nothing to do with us. I got on my knees and begged for mercy, not to mention offering the Duke's family secrets on top of half of all my assets. I survived despite the ridicule and humiliation I had to suffer through. Now, in the present, Dustin's eyes gleamed with resentment as he thought of the Emperor. DeMarcus of the Tuberine imperial family, he mused darkly. He took the throne after his incompetent father and brought on a commoner to bolster the throne's power. He isn't afraid of sinister and malevolent ways so long as the ends justify the means. He's trying to make an example out of my house to keep the high nobles in line. He turned Idili, that incompetent fool, into that dirty mercenary's toy, to tarnish the reputation of the Canyon House and to warn the others. His lips twisted into a sneer. Yes, that is exactly what he was after all along, he muttered. His thoughts burned hotter. He dare ridicule me like this? You think you can get away with manipulating me, the great Dustin? He straightened and barked, William, Geoffrey. Keep a low profile for the time being. Since the emperor got himself a trusty hound, he has nothing to fear. Yes, father, William answered quietly. Dustin looked down at the shattered porcelain at his feet and crushed it beneath his heel. You just wait and see, he swore silently. I will build myself up again and make sure no one can ever look down on the House of Canyon, no matter what it takes. The next morning, the sun filtered gently through the manor windows as Idili walked through the courtyard, a wooden bucket full of damp clothes in her hands. Idili, wait for us, called a familiar voice. She turned to see Salia and Layla, both carrying baskets. Salia. And Layla, she said, blinking in surprise. Salia chuckled, brushing back her hair. You're on your way to hang the sheets to dry, right? It won't be easy to do on your own. Let's do it together since we're headed there too. Idili smiled faintly and nodded. Together, the three women worked quietly in the soft morning breeze, the sound of flapping sheets filling the air. As she worked, Idili's thoughts wandered. It's already been 10 days since I came to this house. If someone were to ask me what I've done, I could proudly tell them that although I am a mere spoil of war, I worked hard as a maid in the laundry room. Because of it, I've gotten rather good at doing the laundry. However, if I had to complain, her thought was abruptly interrupted by a sharp, piercing voice. Hey, Duchess. Your laundry is a complete mess today too. Are you intentionally ignoring me, or are you just that dull? It was Marcia Bohen again. It would be Madame Bohen, who keeps coming around to pick on me, Idili thought with a quiet sigh. Speak up if you've got something to say, Marcia snapped. Idili looked up calmly. Excuse me, Madame Bohen, she began gently. But before Marcia could unleash another insult, Salia stepped forward. Considering that she only just began learning, she's doing quite well, she said firmly. I'm training her just fine, so why don't you return to your station and do your own job? Marcia's face flushed red. What I'm trying to say here is, she began, but Salia cut her off. I'm the one in charge of the laundry room. We're already swamped as it is, so please stop doing this. Being busy is one thing, but then why don't you show her how it's done? Here's a dirty rag. Why don't you show her how to get it nice and clean? Marcia sputtered with indignation, but turned on her heel. I may be leaving you now, but I'll be watching. Do your job properly, she barked as she stormed off. Idili blinked, surprised by Salia's boldness. Is it okay for you to say that, Salia? She asked quietly. Salia shrugged. What's there not to be okay with? I didn't do this for you, so don't worry about it. If she keeps dropping by like that, it's a nuisance for us too. Still, thank you, Idili murmured sincerely. Salia waved it off. Well, it's not like she's gonna try to get back at us, so don't worry. Our meals might get a little skimpy out of nowhere, but even that should go away in a couple of days. She's just that kind of person. Okay, we have a lot of work to do, so let's get back to it. Idili's gaze softened as she watched Salia and Layla work beside her. The head housekeeper who is harassing me, the former Duchess. Salia, who helps me as if she doesn't care that I'm the spoil of war. And the other maids who are suffering because of me. I haven't even had the chance to speak to them or ask them what they think about all this. I hope I'm not causing them too much trouble. That night, as the moonlight poured through her small window, Idili sat on the edge of her narrow bed, rubbing her blistered hands gently. I wonder if they're all okay, she whispered. Maybe. They don't have the leisure to think about anyone else. There is just so much work that my hands are all blistered and chapped. I worry about the maids too, but Count Chrysis hasn't asked for me in the last 10 days. It's almost as if he's forgotten all about me. I'm just relieved I could live as a maid. Would it anger the dead for me to say this? But I'm just happy and grateful to be free of the Lancasters. I'll do my best tomorrow too. I pray that today ends peacefully. I pray that the night remains calm. I hope to take another bite of an apple tomorrow. As her voice faded, a sudden knock startled her. Her eyes widened, breath catching in her throat. Who could it be at this hour? She thought in alarm. It can't be, but what if Count Chrysis changed his mind? Is he here to sleep with me? Her heart pounded as she rose slowly from her bed, the wooden floor cold beneath her bare feet. She took a trembling breath and whispered, "Who is it?" A soft voice came from the other side of the door. It's Daisy from the next room. Could I come in to talk to you? Ideally blinked in surprise. Daisy? I heard Daisy is the youngest maid in this house. She hesitated for a moment, then opened the door. There stood Daisy, a small, cheerful girl with an earnest smile. I'm sorry to come by so late at night, she said politely. Ideally studied her face, thinking, I've passed her a couple of times in the hallways, but we barely said hi before. She stepped aside and said softly, come on in. When Daisy entered, she fidgeted with her hands and blushed slightly. Oh, it's nothing really, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. There's just something I want to give you. It's ointment and cream for when you're hurt. Ideally stared at the small jars Daisy held out, eyes wide with confusion. What? But why are you giving me these? She asked. Daisy's smile turned shy. I heard you moaning in pain every night. The walls are terribly thin here, so you hear pretty much everything. You know, since I'm right next door, Ideally gasped. I'm sorry, I had no idea. Daisy shook her head quickly. It's fine with me. I can sleep through the noise. But I heard Madame Bohen is giving you a hard time. You probably haven't gotten used to your work yet, and if you're in pain all the time, that can't be easy. So I just wanted to give you these. Ideally felt her throat tighten. In the world I lived in, doing something just because was unheard of. I can't believe such a young girl is so thoughtful and caring about those around her. I didn't know there could be eyes of such sincerity without even a shadow of deceit. She reached out and gently took the ointment. Thank you, Miss Daisy, she said warmly. Daisy's eyes widened and she stammered. Did you call me Miss? You can just call me Daisy. Ideally smiled faintly. Then you can just call me Ideally, too. Daisy blushed, her cheeks turning red. I'm not sure I can do that. Then is it okay for me to call you Sister? Ideally's eyes softened, and she nodded, smiling gently. Should I help you put the ointment and cream on your shoulder and back? Daisy asked. I think I can handle it myself, Ideally said with a faint smile. Daisy chuckled. You won't be able to reach your back. We're both girls, so there's no need to be shy. Then, thank you, Ideally said softly. As Daisy helped her, Ideally thought, it's a shame I don't have a diary. If I had one, I would have written that I made a new friend today. The next morning, the breakfast spread was noticeably smaller, just as Salia had predicted. I told you so, Salia said with a wry smile. Ideally looked at the tray and thought, at least there's still fruit. Maybe it's because of the medicine Daisy gave me. My back feels a little better. I used to be forced to fast regularly to maintain my figure. This is fine. I'm sure today will be fine too. In his study, Count Laszlo Krisis held a letter and read it aloud, his deep voice echoing in the room. Dear Count Krisis, the loyal heart of a lion. He folded it slowly, eyes narrowing. Bring her to me. To the sitting room on the first floor. Now, he ordered. Ideally followed the servant through the corridor, her thoughts uneasy. He called for me out of the blue. There will be other people there, so I'm sure nothing will happen. But I wonder what he wants from me. Go on in, the servant said, holding the door open. Ideally took a breath. I was sure today would be a good day, too, she thought, then stepped inside. It's Ideally. I heard you asked for me, she said quietly. Count Krisis sat at the table, the morning light casting sharp lines across his face. Take a seat, he said. She obeyed, lowering her gaze. Count Laszlo Krisis, she thought nervously. I feel overwhelmed every time I see him. He leaned forward slightly. Let me ask you something. Are you familiar with Dowager Marchioness Barbara Celestine? Her eyes widened. What? Barbara, she began, then caught herself. Wait a second. Why is he mentioning the Dowager Marchioness Celestine? Do you not know her? Laszlo asked again. Ideally's pulse quickened. Is it okay for him to know that she and I are acquainted? She replied carefully, Dowager Marchioness Celestine. I do know her, but I've only had tea a few times with her. Then it must have been some tea, Laszlo said dryly. Why else would that rigid woman write to me, a bloodthirsty mercenary, begging for mercy? A letter from the Marchioness Dowager, Ideally exclaimed, eyes wide. Laszlo handed her the letter. She took it with trembling hands and read, her heart swelling with emotion. I can't believe my dearest friend Barbara wrote me a letter. The words blurred as tears gathered in her eyes. I couldn't help but write to you after hearing what happened. The entire Lancaster house kept her in the dark, so she doesn't know what happened behind closed doors. Please do not push Ms. Idili into an even greater dismay. So many people who used to know me as a duchess turned their backs on me. But I couldn't blame them. It made perfect sense. I was guilty of treason of all things. I assumed everyone had abandoned me, but she genuinely believes in my innocence and is worried for me. I thought if I just endured everything without complaints, I could protect myself. But I experience kindness and warm generosity from those who barely even know me. And now, a friend from my past comforts me so I can feel her sincere attempt to console me. But what will Count Chrysis think of this? What if he mistakes Barbara to be an ally to the Duke of Lancaster, who schemed against the Emperor? Idili lifted her eyes, voice trembling. Dowager Marchioness Celestine is a very sympathetic person. Our families are not affiliated in any way, and our friendship is nothing more than a private relationship. So I hope you do not misunderstand this letter. Laszlo leaned back, his tone unexpectedly soft. Are you afraid I might hound the old lady? I don't know why everyone assumes the worst of me. Idili's heart raced. She stood abruptly, saying, That's not it. That's not what I meant at all. I apologize if what I said offended you in any way. Laszlo's lips curved faintly. See? You're trembling like I'm about to cut someone's head off. His voice faltered, and he muttered, almost to himself, I shouldn't have said that to you just now. Idili blinked, startled. I've never seen him make a face like that, she thought. Is he sorry? Laszlo's thoughts churned like a storm. To this woman, I am the man who captured and slaughtered the members of the Lancaster house. She's probably disgusted by me and might even think I'm some cruel and vicious monster. And what do I say to her? Hey, you're trembling like I'm about to cut someone's head off. I can't believe I said that. You insensitive fool. He sighed quietly, his gaze flickering toward her. I just wanted to know why Dowager Marchioness Celestine is going to such lengths for her. What is she thinking right now? Idili finally broke the silence. My lord, all you've done is follow His Majesty's orders and claim victory. It is an anomaly that I should even be alive. There is no reason you should feel uneasy talking about any of this. Laszlo's eyes lingered on her as she spoke with that calm, measured tone. How could she remain so composed while saying such things? He wondered. She may find it difficult to blame me right to my face, but I can't even see a faint shadow of resentment in her eyes. I guess I should say she is a true duchess. Flawless composure and careful choice of words, meticulously shaped through lessons. Her ability to repress her emotions. He clenched his fists slightly. I may be a count by title, but I remain the same man I used to be. I see. Is what I'm feeling right now shame? He cleared his throat and said, Anyway, I want you to reply to this letter. She wouldn't believe it if I wrote back defending myself. Idili blinked. Me? She asked. Laszlo nodded. She smiled faintly. What should I say? Whatever you'd like, he replied, still a little dazed. Then, almost as an afterthought, he added, Oh, I would like you to include this in your letter. Tell her I won't be treating you the way the public expects. The public's expectation? Idili asked, her brows rising. She tilted her head and, with an almost playful boldness, said, Oh, please don't call for me during the night and rough-handle me. Thank you. Laszlo froze. What are the nobles saying about me now? He thought furiously. I made it very clear I would use her as a maid. I have a little sister. How could they think I would do something so brutal? Those high and mighty nobles are the ones behaving like animals. How could they say such things when I haven't even held hands with a woman before? A small bird of a woman at that, too. That's it. She may appear strong, but she's so frail you almost feel sorry for her. She can't even stand to touch a lowly mercenary like me, therefore, I shall never lay a finger on this woman. Idili smiled with genuine gratitude. My lord, thank you so much. Laszlo stiffened. Never. He vowed silently. Later that night, Daisy shivered as she rubbed her arms. It's cold. But it's not like we could skip showering because of it. Idili chuckled. It's too bad. Good work today. She watched the steam rise from the basin and thought, I guess they've never had hot water in this house before. Daisy knew exactly where to put the ointment to feel better despite being so young. I wonder how long she's been working here. I should be nicer to Daisy. As they parted for the night, Daisy waved. Good night. Sweet dreams, Idili smiled. Good night. Entering her room, Idili's eyes fell upon a neat stack of paper on her desk. What's that? Count Chrysis sent over paper for me to write the letter on. He meant what he said earlier. She recalled her own hesitant request from before. I'm sorry to ask, but could you lend me some paper and a pen? I don't have any, and his calm response. Don't worry about that. Her heart warmed at the memory. She hurried to the table. What should I write about first? There's so much I want to tell her, but he'll probably read my letter before sending it out. I can't even write my beloved and esteemed Barbara like before. She dipped the pen into ink and began to write. Dear Dowager Marchioness Celestine, Barbara, you were always concerned for me and took such good care of me. I don't know how I could thank you for remembering me and showing sympathy to a sinner like me. I still remember the first time I met you, 7 years ago, at Countess Roderick's tea party. In her mind, the scene unfolded again. Nobles murmured all around. Dowager Marchioness Celestine has arrived. I can't believe she's really here, Idili whispered to a nearby woman. Is there something wrong with her coming here? The two ladies beside her exchanged uneasy glances. Oh dear. House of Canyons. One woman nearby grabbed Idili's hand. Idili. This is Countess Roderick's tea party. The two ladies don't get along very well. You'll see, they're as different as night and day. Then why would Countess Roderick invite her? Idili asked, puzzled. Obviously, the woman began, but her words were drowned out as a voice announced, Dowager Marchioness Celestine, Barbara M. Celestine, has arrived. Idili looked toward the entrance. That isn't the sound of her heels. She's limping on one leg. Does she have a prosthetic leg? The sound of her walking echoes louder here than it would in other halls. Is this why she was invited here? Her stomach twisted in discomfort. I don't know what conflict the two ladies have between them, but using another person's disability like this is unacceptable. Without hesitation, Idili rushed toward Barbara, smiling brightly. My goodness, my lady. What a coincidence. Do you remember me? You helped me when my carriage broke down in town. You left, refusing to accept payment, so I was hoping to see you again. I had no idea you were Dowager Marchioness Celestine, the crowd murmured. Wow, did that really happen? One whispered. Yes, it did, Barbara replied calmly. I haven't been to many social occasions, so I failed to recognize you at the time. Another woman laughed awkwardly. The Dowager Marchioness showed such generosity. How wonderful. Idili smiled at Barbara. I appreciate you helping me back then. I hope this seems natural. I hope my over-the-top welcome is enough to cover up the uncomfortable noise and silence. Barbara leaned closer and whispered, Well, aren't you a nosy young lady? I'm sorry if it offended you, Idili said softly. Not at all, Barbara murmured back. Idili thought back on that day. Back then, I was young. I was proud of myself for helping an elderly lady in trouble. Around them, gossip buzzed like flies. Have you heard? Viscountess Oberon decided to divorce her husband. Isn't the House of Oberon on the verge of bankruptcy after being scammed? I heard the Viscountess has been working as an interpreter outside of the house. Don't tell me she's asking for a divorce since she's making money, another sneered. How could she hurt her husband's authority like that by earning money outside like that? Oh my, after her husband was generous enough to withstand all that, she's still asking for a divorce. Perhaps she's taken a lover on the side. Idili's expression darkened. I had no idea how easily the social scene can damage a person's reputation. She has been neglecting her duties at home, and one lady began before Barbara interrupted sharply. It would seem that you are much more conservative than when I was young. Barbara's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd, steady and sharp. It would seem that you are much more conservative than when I was young. Why should she be criticized for becoming successful on her own merit? Her house was like a sinking ship, so she did everything she could to keep it afloat. She wanted to do better, so she worked hard. Idili looked at her, eyes wide. What's wrong with ambition like that? Does that mean it's okay to be ambitious? There's nothing wrong with living like that. The woman with red hair laughed mockingly. I think you speak too boldly. How can you compare what she does with a working man? Viscountess Oberon, who failed her duties as the lady of the house, Barbara interrupted with a sigh, her tone firm. She is a progressive woman who earns a living to make up for what her husband failed to provide. You should all be fighting for your rights, but here you are, dragging others through the mud, the nobles whispered among themselves. No wonder they say she devoured her own husband. Apparently, she would lecture her husband on his affairs since she was young. Another chimed in softly. She must see herself in Viscountess Oberon. Don't mind her, Countess Roderick. We feel the same way you do. Then shall we move on to something else now? After the hectic tea party, Idili called out by the main gate, "Wait, Lady Celestine. Could you spare me some time?" Barbara turned to her. What is it, Lady Canyon?" Idili bowed her head slightly. "Earlier, I was wrong. I was out of line to feel sorry for you. I had no idea you were stronger than anyone in the room. I want to become as strong as you, Lady Celestine. Could I come visit you occasionally, if you don't mind?" Barbara smiled softly. "That sounds wonderful. I would love for us to have such discussions." Since then, they spent much time together, speaking often, laughing over tea and sharing their hearts. Before long, they became each other's dearest friends. Sweet Barbara probably loved Idili more than anyone else in the world. Had I only taken what she told me closer to heart, perhaps things would be a lot different than now, Idili thought bitterly. Her memory replayed their last encounter, Barbara's voice fierce and filled with conviction. "Idili, don't ever get used to making sacrifices. Marrying the old Lord Lancaster. You must liberate yourself from the manipulative men who are trying to control you." Idili had trembled as she replied, but if I don't do as my father tells me to, my only other option is death." Barbara had reached out to her, eyes burning with urgency. "Why would you die? Please, Idili, look at me. If you would just ask for help, I will help you with everything." That was the last time she ever saw her friend. "I'm sorry, Barbara," Idili thought as she wrote. "I only hope that this letter would give you some peace of mind and ease your worries." Elsewhere, Marcia's shrill voice filled the corridor. "Really?" Count Chrysis summoned Idili. A maid nodded quickly. "Yes, Madame Bohen. But he summoned her to the drawing room during the day, and she just left right now." "I guess it wasn't anything serious then." Marcia's face twisted with jealousy. "She is such a minx. She's not to be taken lightly. Just look at how Salia's taking her side." Another maid giggled. "Salia's sort of weird, though. The same goes for Layla and Daisy too. Birds of a feather, right?" Marcia clenched her fists. "I'll have to make sure they know their place and keep their heads low. Those insolent brats who won't even pay their tributes, I'll make it crystal clear to them." The maid blushed and whispered about that. "Some of the staff have been complaining about having to shower with cold water. They even got suspicious that I wasn't showering with them." "What? You kept your mouth shut, right?" Marcia barked. "Of course I did," the maid laughed nervously. "I made up an excuse. Warm water is a privilege reserved for you and me. Why else would I be paying 100 ling tons every month?" Marcia smirked to herself. "When I sell off some items from this house, it'll more than make up for my losses now." She pointed a finger at the maid. "You'd better watch your mouth. If Lady Linnea finds out about this, you know what I mean, right?" "Of course. Besides, she's not interested in such things," the maid reassured her. Marcia's smile widened. "Yes, of course things will be just fine. Lady Linnea trusts my every word, and Count Chrysis is hardly home. This entire household might as well be in my pocket." Elsewhere, Idili handed a sealed envelope to a servant. "It's the letter his lordship asked me to write. Please pass it along." "I will," he said with a bow. In the laundry room, Salia sighed heavily as sweat rolled down her temple. "Why is there no end to this darn laundry? She's making us do such unnecessary things." Layla shrugged. "I guess Madame Bohen thought something didn't sit right again." Salia frowned. "Where is she anyway?" "Well, it's obvious," Layla said dryly. Meanwhile, Marcia was brushing the hair of her lady. "She's probably whispering weird things to Lady Linnea again." "Is that true?" "Yes, my lady," Marcia replied smoothly. "Have I ever told you something that wasn't true?" "Leave matters concerning high society and managing this house to me." Lady Linnea turned her head slightly. "Okay, Please do as you told me. This estate must run perfectly, like any other house of nobility. Marcia smiled. Yes, my lady. In another corner of the house, Daisy rubbed her aching shoulders. Ow, my shoulders. My arms almost fell out wiping and mopping today. There isn't an inch of my body that doesn't ache. Idili looked at her with gentle concern. You did a great job today, Daisy. Are we expecting guests? Why did we mop down the entire house out of the blue? Daisy shook her head. We don't get guests in this house. I guess the head housekeeper's just in a mood. Idili blinked. Actually, she's right. It's already been a month since I've been living here, but I've never once seen a guest. Count Chrysis is a nobleman belonging to the emperor's inner circle, and yet there are no visitors that come around the estate. Is it because of all the distasteful rumors about him? She paused and thought. I also had a negative first impression of him. But considering how generous he has been with me, and his general attitude, he doesn't seem like a terrible man. The only reason I can live this ordinary life is... Anyway, Daisy cut in, her tone chipper. Even if we don't have any guests, sometimes we do this sort of thing because of Lady Linnea. What? Idili jolted. Daisy offered her a piece of bread. Lady Linnea, Count Chrysis's younger sister. You've heard of her, right? Here, have some bread. Oh, I did hear that a lot of staff quit because of Lady Linnea, Idili said softly. That's right, Daisy replied. When Lady Linnea gets moody, it can be hard to bear. She's never had to work a day in her life, so I don't understand why she's so concerned with our work. Is that so? Idili murmured. Since he was young, Count Chrysis has always made a lot of money, Daisy explained. That's why they've never skipped a meal before, even though they were commoners. That pretty much says everything. Honestly, if her brother worked so hard to become nobility, she could just live her life being forever grateful. I just don't understand why she's so immature. Idili thought quietly. The Chrysis siblings who became nobility overnight, and a former duchess who became a maid overnight. It's like we're perfect opposites of each other. I learned how to wash the laundry for the first time in this house. Before I learned how to do it, I didn't know anything about it. Since this is their first time in such a high place, maybe they don't really know how to lead their lives as nobles. Despite being in the emperor's inner circle, the estate of Count Chrysis stood eerily quiet, its grand halls stripped of warmth and polish. The walls whispered neglect, and though the count, head of the family, wielded immense influence, he seemed indifferent to the state of his home. The only lady of the house fretted endlessly over the maids' every movement, as if control over them could substitute for order in the estate. But perhaps they weren't strange at all. Perhaps they simply didn't know any better. With no butler to oversee the mansion, the head maid now held all the power, ruling the staff with whispers and manipulation. One afternoon, Idili turned to Daisy, curiosity softening her tone. Daisy, did the other maids quit all because of Lady Chrysis? Daisy shook her head. No. There have been plenty of people who quit because of Madame Bohen, but if they blame Lady Chrysis, his lordship gives a good recommendation letter, so... Idili remembered the count's cold, measured voice during a past encounter. Here is your letter of recommendation. Thank you for your services. Daisy's cheeks flushed slightly as she giggled. He seems scary, but he's nice, isn't he? Idili thought silently. She's right. He does come off as scary. Still, he's a good person, but there are some serious problems here. Her gaze swept across the crumbling corridors. It wouldn't matter if this was a house on the verge of collapsing, but the House of Chrysis is a new noble family. As long as Emperor D. Marcus Tuberan's power remains strong, his right-hand man, Count Laszlo Chrysis, must serve his duty to the fullest as well. Her mind drifted. That means Count Chrysis must find himself a suitable ally as soon as possible. Maybe he could marry someone. Marriage is a great way to survive in high society. Did His Majesty not offer to introduce someone for him? Anyway, whoever he marries, I hope it's someone who pities me. The next day came swiftly. Lady Linnea stood by the parlor window, her sharp gaze fixed on Idili as she entered. So you're the famed Idili Lancaster? Her voice dripped with curiosity and disdain. Idili bowed politely. Count Chrysis and Lady Chrysis both make their summons out of the blue, she thought. They don't look much alike. Softly, she began, I'm just Idili now, Since the House of Lancaster is no, I know that much, Linnea snapped before she could finish. Idili blinked, startled. Is she mad at me? Now that I think about it, I don't even know how old Lady Chrysis is. She might be in her late teens. She doesn't really feel very threatening. Linnea leaned forward, her tone laced with mockery. So I heard Duke Lancaster was an old geezer. How did you marry someone like that? Did you want to become a duchess that badly? Idili's reply came quietly. Unfortunately, I didn't have a say in my marriage. I had to follow if my father ordered me. Linnea's eyes widened in indignation. That's awful. How could you call someone like that a father? Idili lowered her gaze. You're right, my lady. I wonder how my father didn't know something even a young girl understands. So then, Linnea pressed, how did you share a bedchamber with such an old man? He had a longtime concubine, Idili replied calmly. So I never shared a bedchamber with him. Concubine? Linnea gasped. Since she was in charge of the Duke's rebellion funds, Idili continued, she is probably dead now too. Linnea's voice trembled. Then what was your role in that house? Idili's expression softened as old memories surfaced. There was once a time when I was just dying to prove my worth. I thought if I proved my competence, if I fulfilled all the duties of my role, I thought I could be better. However, she looked up and said, I only filled in the role of Duchess to uphold the appearance of a perfect house, while taking care of some undesirable tasks here and there. Foolish Idili, she thought bitterly. What a foolish life I led. Linnea narrowed her eyes. You? Why are you smiling like that? You're looking down on me too, aren't you? Pardon, Idili asked, startled. Linnea's voice rose, cracking with insecurity. You might as well be a slave now, so why are you smiling? You were thinking that I'm trying to act like the lady of the house when I'm just a lowly commoner girl, weren't you? Because you still think you're the perfect lady. Idili froze. Why is she yelling at me all of a sudden? Did I say something to upset you? She asked softly. If you would tell me what I did wrong, I could you, Linnea shouted. You're looking down on me. Kneel this instant. How dare you look down on your employer? Without hesitation, Idili knelt and bowed her head. I am sorry. I suppose I should stand since you did not order me to sit. Linnea trembled. What are you doing? Have you no pride? You were a duchess. What are you doing in front of a mere count's sister? Idili's voice was calm, almost distant. I am no longer a duchess. Pride and honor of being a noble. Oh, what worthless value it has. What is the true pride and honor one must hold on to? My world has already turned upside down, she thought as she raised her head slowly. You are my employer, she said gently, and my knees aren't that expensive. Linnea's lip quivered. How dare you? How dare you talk back to me? Do you think I don't know what you nobles think? You mock and ridicule people after inviting them. You liars. Do you even know who you owe your lives to? My brother trained those mercenaries who ran like wild dogs and won the war for you. So then why? Idili watched her quietly. Just as I thought, Lady Linnea was seeing the other nobles through me. Get out of my room now, Linnea screamed. I don't want to see you. As Idili stepped out, her mind swirled. She's standing at the center of the high society I left behind. She could have remained free and lovely. Softly, she murmured to herself, somehow, she reminds me of you. Actually, her name is similar too. In the silence of her thoughts, a voice echoed from memory. Her sister's, fragile and trembling. I don't want any more of this, Idili. She saw the image of a young girl crying, hands trembling. I can't take it anymore. Idili had tried to comfort her then. Everything will be better once you're married. If you just hang on a little more. But her sister had shouted, slapping her hands away. No, Idili, you can't stand this because you and I are different. I've already endured as much as I possibly could. My life isn't worth living anymore. Idili closed her eyes, her heart aching. My little sister, who is no longer with me, Lynn Canyon. There wasn't much history to the House of Canyon. Idili's great-grandfather, once a reckless gambler, had won a parcel of land that happened to hold a sapphire mine. Overnight, his fortune changed. Newly rich, he offered an enormous amount of gold to the emperor, who was struggling with the royal family's financial troubles. In gratitude, The emperor granted him the title of count. Thus, the House of Canyon was born nobles of sudden wealth, but no lineage, dignity, or refinement. Dustin Canyon, Idili's father, raised his daughters under the shadow of that insecurity. "Have you memorized the 4 most prestigious families now?" he barked at young Lin one afternoon. "Yes, father," she answered timidly. "The House of Duke Lancaster, the House of Duke Barrington." "Wrong, you foolish girl," he thundered. Lin flinched. She was only 10. Turning to her older daughter, he demanded, "Idili, name the 4 houses." Idili, 12 years old, straightened and replied, "Yes, father. The other 3 are the House of Duke Barrington, the House of Marquis Tolaine, and the House of Marquis Winblair." "Yes, that's correct," Dustin said sharply. "Those 4 houses hold power and authority that even the royal family cannot take lightly. So never forget, you will have to marry into one of them so no one will ever look down on the Canyons. Do you understand?" "Yes, father," Idili responded firmly. After he left, Lin looked up at her sister. "Hey, Idili," she whispered. "Will I become more like you when I'm 12? I feel like such a fool." Idili's eyes softened. "What are you talking about, Lin? You're not a fool." "But that's what father said earlier," Lin murmured. Idili sighed gently. "Well, you know how harsh he can be with his words. He only meant to encourage you to do better." "It doesn't mean he really thinks you're a fool." Lin hesitated. "You think so?" "Of course," Idili said, grabbing her hand. "Should we go downstairs and have some cookies instead?" "I'll give you some of mine, too." Lin blushed faintly. "Idili, when we're finished with the cookies, let's study together. I'll help you out, so don't worry." Lin smiled shyly. "Yeah, sure. With you, I'm okay with anything." But their small joy was short-lived. The cook intercepted them at the door. "Return to your room," she said sternly. "Lady Lin is not allowed any snacks starting today." "What? Why?" Idili asked. "Lady Lin did terribly on her test yesterday," the cook explained. "Count Canyon has ordered us not to give her any snacks until she earns the right to them." "How could he?" Idili began, but the cook interrupted. "Lady Lin, have you even completed your homework for today?" Lin's voice dropped to a whisper. "No." Then, before Idili could stop her, she turned and dashed toward her room. "Then you enjoy your snack, Idili. I'll be in my room doing homework." "Lin," Idili called after her, but she didn't turn back. Idili's thoughts churned painfully. Father has always been strict, but lately, he's become cruel. Why only to us? Why is there nothing I can do? My heart aches, and I'm so angry. I wish I could grow up sooner for Lin's sake. Maybe everything will be better once we're married." She clenched her fists. "If I become a perfect lady, a graceful bride, beautiful, slim, always smiling, if I make father proud, maybe then he'll stop being cruel. Maybe then I'll be free." Years passed, but the cruelty only deepened. One day, Dustin's voice roared through the manor, shaking the walls. "Lin Canyon, you're already 16. When are you going to get your act together? Do you think you'll attract any men, let alone from the 4 great houses? You're just a waste of my money. Your sister has already made her debut in society, making connections. When will you be of any use to me? Why can't you become someone I wouldn't be ashamed to let out of this house?" Idili stood frozen in the hallway, her heart pounding. If I just become the person father wants me to be, would Lin like it if I gave her something beautiful? Would that make her happy? She tried to believe that someday, somehow, she'd make things better. But in her room, Lin sat on the floor, surrounded by scattered books and papers, sobbing. "Idili, I just can't do this anymore," she cried. "I don't think I could ever become a noble lady like you. The only thing I want is to fly away like that bird." Days later, the mansion fell silent. Dustin's voice, cold and unfeeling, broke the stillness. "Lin is dead." For a moment, no one moved. Idili's eyes widened in disbelief. "What? Wait, what do you mean?" Dustin looked at her with irritation. "She's dead. Do I have to repeat myself?" She accidentally fell from the 3rd-floor balcony while looking out. That's all there is to it. Make sure word doesn't get out. Idili's knees gave out. I can't believe she did this. During such a busy time, she thought numbly. Later, sitting alone on her floor, she whispered, "Lin." Why did Lin? Her tears fell soundlessly. "I can't take it anymore. I have feelings, thoughts, a voice. How much longer must I endure this? I've already endured as much as I possibly could. My life isn't worth living anymore." The fragile hope she had nurtured after meeting Barbara withered into despair once more. And just as father wished, she married into the House of Lancaster, a union without love, only duty. "You know, Lin, I always thought of escaping like you did," she thought. "But with you by my side, I thought I could hold on. No one can bear the weight of a life they never asked for." And now, as she looked at Lady Linnea, angry, insecure, and desperate for validation, Idili's heart ached. If she's in pain, I wish I could teach her how to endure it, but am I even in a position to do that? My heart feels so heavy, and I'm so mad at how helpless I am. The main gate opened, and Count Laszlo stepped inside. He looked around the palace grounds, his gaze sharp and displeased, and thought, "Now even the head housekeeper doesn't bother to greet me." Although my sole purpose of accepting this estate was to have rendezvous with my soldiers, this is not how an actual count's estate would be like. Before he could take another step, Linnea burst toward him, her voice bright as she called out, "Laszlo, you're home." She welcomed him warmly, saying, "Welcome back. Did you have a good day?" Laszlo replied simply, "Yeah." Linnea then rushed behind him, her curiosity bubbling over as she asked, "What did you do at the palace today?" Laszlo answered without much thought, "Same thing I always do." "Why do you ask?" Linnea followed closely and said, "HM." "No reason." Laszlo glanced at her, his expression turning serious as he asked, "Why did you follow me into my room?" "You have something to say?" Linnea flinched slightly and replied, "Huh? Oh, I mean, it's nothing big really." She cleared her throat and continued, "I was invited to attend this party. Viscountess Emerson is hosting it." "Do you know her?" Laszlo sighed and said, "I don't." Linnea mumbled, "Oh really? Okay, I see." Laszlo then responded calmly, "You don't have to go if you don't want to." Linnea immediately flailed her hands and said, "No. If I don't go to these social events, I wouldn't have a chance to wear all the beautiful gowns I have. But it's just..." Her hands tightened as she admitted, "I don't know what to say at parties." Hesitating, she continued, "So I was wondering, Laszlo, if it's all right with you, could you find me a decent tutor?" Laszlo replied sternly, "Linnea Crisis. If I find you someone decent, will you learn without throwing a tantrum this time?" Linnea drooped and protested, "When did I ever throw a tantrum?" Laszlo pressed her, saying, "Answer me, Linnea." He glared at her and continued, "I've hired multiple tutors for you already. Remember why they all quit in less than 2 weeks?" She jolted and said, "But that's..." And suddenly memories resurfaced. She recalled a lady saying, "It's okay, Lady Linnea. I understand that you may not know things as a commoner, but I am a little worried if you'll ever be able to understand the material at all." Linnea thought inwardly, they were the ones who ridiculed me first. They always pretend to be refined and sophisticated, but what am I supposed to do when they treat me like a fool right at my face? I know it's ridiculous to even think about it at a social party. She remembered shouting, "How dare you look down on your employer?" And then thinking, "But at least I can yell as much as I want in this estate." Trembling, she had told herself, "It's not my fault. They just had such pampered lives. It doesn't make sense for them to quit like that only because their employer said something." Laszlo called out, "Linnea." Linnea turned her face and said, "Oh, that reminds me. That Duchess wasn't what I expected, though." Laszlo flinched. "What?" Linnea tilted her head and said, "She's held a higher position than any of the tutors that ever came here, but she had no pride at all. I told her to kneel in front of me, and she actually did. I called her in to see her for myself, but she was acting all high," and Laszlo suddenly yelled, "Linnea Crisis." Linnea startled and exclaimed, "What? You scared me." "Why would you yell like that?" Laszlo shouted back, "Do you not understand how ashamed you should be for what you did? How could you force someone who works for you to kneel?" His heart throbbed as he continued, "Using your authority to trample on the weak. That's exactly what the nobles we hate so much do." Linnea flinched, then nervously replied, I know that, but why can't I?" Then she shouted, "I want to look down on those nobles who despise me." "Is that so bad?" Laszlo calmly answered, but you didn't treat a noble with contempt. You only ridiculed a maid. You could never do that to an actual noble. Don't you think that makes you a coward? Linnea flinched and asked, Laszlo, you don't even know what you're talking about. She thought to herself, I never told you about all the mockery and ridicule I had to endure, nor how difficult it has been and how resentful I've felt, because it would only upset you. Aren't you supposed to help me? With tears in her eyes, she yelled, fine. Aren't you just a know-it-all? She thought again, if I'm struggling to talk in front of those nobles? Then she burst at Laszlo. You don't care what happens to me at all, do you? Laszlo called out, wait, Linnea. But Linnea shouted back, well, then whatever, and slammed the door as she stormed outside. Left alone, Laszlo sighed. Darn it, he mumbled. I don't know what to do in a situation like this either. What am I doing right now? This is all because that snake DeMarcus made me a count. He recalled DeMarcus's words. You should accept the title even if you don't want to, Laszlo. You have to become a symbol for the mercenaries, Laszlo had asked. A symbol, and DeMarcus continued. If the mercenaries were to actively participate in society instead of giving up on their lives, they need a symbol like you to look up to. So become the new authority. He had smirked and said, authority will protect Calliope, your mercenary guild, along with anything else that you value. I'm offering such a high title to you for a reason. Then he grinned, someday, you two will accept your fate. Just like how I had no choice but to accept my fate. Back in the present, Laszlo thought, what is fate going to do when I don't even know how to handle my own little sister? He brushed his hair back and muttered, should I get another recommendation for a tutor from the household division? I'd better tell Linnea that this is the absolute last time. She'll probably feel better about going to the party if I buy her an expensive necklace. He then added quietly, and I wonder if Idili is okay. His thoughts darkened as he continued. She must have felt humiliated after having kneeled before Linnea. Even if she's no longer one, she was a duchess after all. And what if she's crying alone? He put on his jacket and thought, maybe I should apologize on Linnea's behalf. No, but that would make Linnea look bad. All right, let's just ignore it. Laszlo, you are thinking way too much about this woman. Opening the door, he said, the cold air is making me feel much better. Okay, let's just drop it. Bad rumors are bound to follow if I visit her at such a late time. Darn it. Elsewhere, Marquis Windblair smoked quietly and said, well, now, Duke Barrington responded, ever since the victory banquet, the mood among socialites has been quite tense. Windblair remarked, it's because the House of Duke Lancaster was brought down so easily. We all assumed that the Lancasters would have stronger foundation than the Imperial House. Duke Barrington replied, I thought they would be able to survive at least until the end of the year. This is all because of him. Marquis Windblair then tossed his cigarette onto a newspaper bearing Count Laszlo's image and spat out, Laszlo Chrysis. That filthy mutt. Who would have guessed that a member of the imperial family would swallow his pride and join hands with a lowly mercenary? Duke Barrington spoke with clear disdain, saying, because they're both the same sort of brutes. DeMarcus Tuberine fought in the battlefield, too. He's only royalty by title. What would he know of elegance or refinement? Which is exactly why we need a new emperor. As long as DeMarcus is emperor, us nobles will only continue to decline, Marquis replied cautiously, but it's too early for us to step in. I would much rather borrow the hands of the lesser nobles. Our 4 houses, no, 3 houses getting directly involved could come back to haunt us. Marquis Tolaine waved his hand and suggested, then what about that nouveau riche family? Duke Barrington answered calmly, oh, the House of Count Canyon. As it happens, the Count's daughter was given away to that lowly mercenary, Chrysis. Marquis Windblair smirked and said, he's a real piece of work. First, he sold off his daughter to Lancaster, hoping to forge a tie with the Duke, and now he sold her off to the Emperor to protect his house. I don't know if such a trivial man can manage to do something worthwhile, but I'm sure he'll prove to be useful one way or another. How much longer are you going to be squandering my money? What good is a daughter if not to marry off? Now that Lynn is dead, you're the only daughter, so why are you acting out? Your marriage must succeed. Mark my words, Idili Canyon. Idili blinked as those words echoed in her mind. Then she woke up gasping for breath. "Oh, it was only a dream," she said as she steadied herself. She sighed and thought, "I still wonder sometimes. Was being wealthy not good enough to satisfy father and the House of Canyon?" Rising from her bed, she brushed the sheets and muttered to herself, if he wanted to become an honorable noble, he could have made donations to the orphanage or the civilian hospital, instead of marrying me off to one of the 4 most prestigious families. But it's all useless now. Clenching her fist, she said, "Let's get ready and go to work. The morning sun is shining gloriously. It's time to start my day again." The next morning, the maids were already busy with their work. 2 maids whispered among themselves, "So, it isn't going to be easy." "I don't care. Figure out a way. Keep in mind what happens when you don't meet the deadline." "Yes." Idili tilted her head slightly and thought, they work in different stations. What could they be talking about? Actually, there could be work that I don't know about. Salia swallowed a bite of food and asked, "Idili, if you're finished, shall we go?" Idili replied, "Sure, Salia." When they stepped outside, Idili looked around and said, "The estate feels emptier than usual for some reason." Layla let out a sigh of relief and explained, "It's because Madame Bohen isn't here. Lady Linnea went out today, and she went along too." Idili thought, "Isn't it a maid's job to attend to the lady when she goes out?" Salia added, "Madame Bohen's only going to make Lady Linnea buy useless things again. It's not my money, but it still feels so wasteful." They opened the door and saw that the room was empty. Layla muttered, Idili said, "Looks like no one has come yet." "Is everyone taking their time today because Madame Bohen's not here?" Salia asked. Do you want to see for yourself?" Idili was surprised. "What?" Salia chuckled and said, "It's already been nearly 2 months since you joined the house, right? Then it's about time you got to take a look around the estate. Why don't you go pick up the laundry today? We'll wash all the laundry you couldn't finish yesterday." Idili hesitated and said, "But there's a lot of it." "And they were Madame Bohen's orders." Layla laughed lightly. "It's okay. She won't be barging in on us today." Idili still looked uneasy and said, "Still." Layla then asked, "You went through quite a lot of trouble talking to Lady Linnea yesterday." Idili jolted and replied, "Oh, no, it was fine." Layla smiled. "Haha, well, that's good to hear. Anyway, just take your time on the way back." Salia added with a chuckle, "There's no rush, so don't worry." Idili nodded and said, "Then, I'll be back, Layla." "Thank you, Salia." Salia pulled up her cuffs and said, "Let's get these done and over with." Layla waved her hand. "We've got it." Then she turned to Salia and said, "You're so kind, Salia." Salia asked, "Why?" Layla replied, "It would have been so hard for Idili to wash all these by herself." Salia answered quietly, "You were worried about her too, Layla. She's rather frail. Idili, of all people, needs to know the ins and outs of this estate. All the other maids are free to simply quit and walk out, but Idili, as a war trophy, may never be able to." Idili hurried through the palace grounds, thinking, "This is the first time I've left the laundry room during the busiest time of the day." Inside, the maids continued working busily. She thought, "Layla and Salia are both so kind. They gave me some time off on purpose so I could take a break. But I should still hurry back and help those 2 out." Pushing a trolley, she reflected, "Now that I've got a new task, I feel like I'm getting recognized for my hard work." Suddenly, Idili noticed servants laughing and thought, It's that maid from before. And Madame Bohen's acquaintances. Why isn't she in her designated area, but taking a break here instead? Everyone else seemed busy. Where are all the maids stationed here? She was giving orders to another maid about something earlier. Was she pushing her tasks onto someone else? Lifting a bedsheet, Idili thought, I knew there was an inner circle of maids centering around Madame Bohen. But that doesn't mean she's allowed to slack off on her work and push it onto others. What's even worse is she passed on her work to younger maids. I wonder if Count Chrysis knows about all this. Then again, what will I be able to do about the issues around how this place is managed? As she worked, Idili suddenly flinched when she heard voices from outside the door. Then, Commander, wouldn't this only benefit the yellow fox? The crimson rat is brimming with venom, which means they'll be much more cautious. However, Idili gasped and thought, it's Count Chrysis. Let's leave before they catch me here." A man suddenly turned and shouted, "Who's there?" He rushed to the door, threw it open, and yelled, "I've told the kitchen maid to let no one in here." "How dare you sneak in here like a little rat?" Then he demanded, "Who are you? What were you doing here? Who are you? What were you doing here?" The man demanded sharply. Idili immediately bowed her head and answered, "I'm a maid from the laundry room. I was just picking up his lordship's laundry. If my presence has interrupted you, then I can come back at a later time." Laszlo responded without hesitation, "There's no need for that. You can go now." The man looked shocked and protested, "Wait, Commander, I've never seen this maid before." "Have you verified her identity?" Laszlo replied calmly, "Yes, almost to an excessive degree." Idili lowered her gaze and said, "Then I'll be on my way, my lord." The man frowned and muttered, "What's that supposed to mean? But I feel like I've seen her somewhere before." Suddenly, his eyes widened as realization struck him, and he shouted, "That woman, is she the former Duchess of Lancaster? You really brought her in as your maid? What happened while I was away? I thought it was just a rumor. More importantly, what if she overheard our conversation?" Laszlo replied coldly, "It's none of your business. And if she figured out what we were talking about just by briefly eavesdropping, we should invite her to join our guild." The man grew even more suspicious and said, "She seems suspicious. A woman who used to be the Duchess is working in the laundry room? She probably has never even gotten her hands wet before." Laszlo snapped back, "You fool. Did you not see the condition of her hands?" The man asked, confused, "Why would I have seen her hands?" Laszlo answered, "Those were the rough hands of a hard-working woman. Don't be so prejudiced. Besides, Idili's never even gotten a discreet message from Count Canyon." The man was startled. "What?" Laszlo thought to himself. Even Dowager Marchioness wrote to her. How could they even call themselves family? Then he continued aloud, "That probably means Idili," but the man interrupted him sharply. "Did you just call her by her name?" Laszlo froze for a moment, then said, "Let's get back to what we were discussing earlier. Keep a close eye on the Crimson Rat. If the Yellow Fox makes a move, they'll surely react." The man nodded. "Okay then, I'll trust your intuition." Inwardly, however, he thought, "But sir, I have a pretty good intuition about certain things too." Laszlo turned away and said, "Then I'll be heading to the palace to work." The man stared after him and called out, "Hold on, Commander." "Sir?" Meanwhile, Idili returned, pushing her trolley as she thought, "Although the Count doesn't seem to suspect me of anything, it does put me in a tricky situation. I'm not in a position to speak up, but even if I did get a chance to speak, it seems like the Count's people wouldn't believe me. For now, I should do what I can." Elsewhere, the Grand Master of the Royal Chivalry stepped forward and called out, "Hey, Sir Milton. Are you just finishing up your training?" Edmund Milton, the second in command of the Royal Chivalry, greeted him respectfully. "Good afternoon, sir," the Grand Master asked. "Did you train to match the household division again? You don't need to overdo yourself. You already have a lot of responsibilities as it is." Edmund chuckled and replied, "I'm not necessarily trying to match our drills to the household division, sir. Although the House of Duke Lancaster's uprising has been suppressed, we never know who else might attempt to challenge the Emperor. I just thought we should always be prepared." The Grand Master nodded quietly. A knight standing beside Edmund clapped and said enthusiastically, "That was a model answer, sir." "Wow." Then he added, "What a shame. If it hadn't been for Count Chrysis, you wouldn't be just second in command of the Royal Chivalry, but the commander of the Household Division by now." Edmund smiled and replied, "Nonsense. There is a suitable position for everyone." Patting his shoulder, he continued, "I'm more than honored to be the second in command of the Royal Chivalry." The knight grumbled, "Seriously, you are just too nice, sir." It was then explained that there were two armed forces in service to the imperial household. One was the Household Division that protected the Emperor in close quarters. The other was the Royal Chivalry, which protected the palace and fought in war. The Grand Master smiled softly and said, "Well, the public does consider the Household Division as the higher order since they guard and protect His Majesty very closely. But that doesn't mean we're competing with them. "There's no need for you to become like that workaholic," Edmund replied. "I'm just doing the best I can to fulfill my duties." Another knight smiled gently and said, "That's right. Rapport with the knights is important too. Considering that, you are by far the best." Edmund smiled faintly as he thought, "Every move His Majesty makes carries significance because that's how thorough he is. So I'm sure he has his reasons for putting that mercenary Chrysis in an important position. But still, it is a bit much. I can tell by the reactions among the knights in the chivalry too. I don't like it." Elsewhere in the palace, Laszlo was adjusting his shirt when he suddenly noticed movement near the door. "Who's out there?" he called. A voice answered from outside, "Hello, sir. We're from the chivalry." "We are here to see you, Commander," Laszlo replied after a pause. "Come in." The door burst open and several knights entered, greeting him formally. "Terry Bogarden, Angelo Vallon, and Joseph Oz of the Royal Chivalry, sir." Laszlo looked at them and said, "I don't think I've ever seen you around before." One of them replied awkwardly, "Oh, we haven't exactly achieved anything significant, so it's only natural that you wouldn't recognize us." Laszlo adjusted his cuffs and said, "That's enough sweet talk. What do you want?" One knight hesitated. This may be, we know this is a very sudden request," but another added, "Either way, we realize that the Royal Chivalry and the Household Division are in cooperation with each other, sir." Laszlo sighed. "Get to the point." Gathering their courage, the knight blurted out, "Please give us the honor of training with you at your estate, sir." Laszlo remained silent for a moment, then turned his face and said, "That certainly is a random request." The knights laughed nervously. "Oh, haha, this sounds ridiculous when I say it out loud. But we do understand that you are a busy man, so please feel free to decline." Laszlo stared at them and asked, "Then why are you here, asking me for a favor?" The knight was startled. "What?" Another hesitated and said, You see, we want to become strong like you, sir. But all we're doing at the palace are the same drills that everyone else does, which makes it easy for us to get lazy. So we've come to the conclusion that we need to be trained by someone strong and capable of judging us objectively." The knights grew animated and continued, "And that's why we thought of you, Sir Chrysis. Not only are you the youngest commander of the Household Division, you never let personal feelings get in the way of training. We also wanted to know how other corps train as well. I've heard from a household guard that your door is always open to anyone who is willing to improve themselves." Laszlo listened carefully and thought, "They're not entirely wrong. I've never pushed people away from approaching me. It was simply that the noble guards had no interest in seeking out a commander who had once been a mere mercenary." Then he examined them again and thought, "But they seem to be out of shape. Their posture is bad, and it doesn't look like they would improve all that much. I guess they've only recently come to their senses. I don't dislike those who wish to improve themselves. You have to become a symbol for the mercenaries." He recalled Emperor Demarcus's words, "Laszlo, someday, you too will accept your fate." Just like I had no choice but to accept my fate. Returning to the present, Laszlo thought, "So is this what he meant? I never expected the knights to tell me something like this. I'm not exactly thrilled that things are going according to his plan, but finally, he spoke aloud. The desire to train is commendable." The knight's eyes lit up. "Then does that mean?" Laszlo raised his gaze and said, "So let me ask you one question." The knights blinked nervously as Laszlo continued, "Why is it that you wish to train at my estate? Out of all places?" "Why was it that they wished to train at his estate of all places?" Laszlo asked, and the knights glanced at him before one replied with an awkward "oh," explaining that they could not exactly train at the palace training hall since the higher-ups would never approve, while another hesitated and added that it would seem strange for them to train with him when the chivalry Grand Master was around. Right, and then suddenly realized, "Oh, that's right, and even if the Grand Master were fine with it, the other knights might not be," and Laszlo responded calmly that it made sense. Though inwardly he thought about the unspoken rivalry between the Household Division and the Royal Chivalry, and how he should not do anything that might bother the Royal Chivalry's commanding officers. Before finally agreeing and telling them to come to his estate next Saturday at 3, causing the knights to cheer loudly and shout their thanks, promising they would definitely be there, after which Laszlo shook his head and told them they could return to their stations. watching them leave as he reflected that teaching them a few basic skills should be fine even if he was unsure how much they would improve. Yet, such a desperate desire to get stronger was not easy to come by. Outside the palace, Marcia sharply called everyone to attention and clapped her hands with a gentle smile as she announced that they would have guests that weekend, and since it was the new year, she had planned to redecorate the manor. Anyway, ordering everyone to make sure their areas were spotless, prompting murmurs of surprise from the maids, only for Marcia to shout toward the laundry room to take down the winter curtains, wash the spring curtains, and have them ready, making Salia flinch and cry out what, while Layla nervously pointed out there were over 150 curtains in the manor, Salia shouting back that they did not even dry well in winter, to which Marcia merely shrugged and said that was for them to figure out and she did not care if they had to dry them all night long. Even cutting off Layla when she suggested starting with just the first floor lobby and drawing room by shouting enough and ordering all of them done, while Idili listened in silence and thought this was bad. Because doing laundry was one thing, but the house did not seem ready to greet guests, making her wonder what had suddenly gotten into Count Chrysis. A few days later, Laszlo announced as he walked toward the carriage that he would be going somewhere other than the palace that day, startling the servant who replied sir, and then acknowledged it had been a while since he went out and asked where he should take him. And soon the carriage arrived at the residential area of the nobles on Grania Avenue, where Laszlo stepped down and was welcomed by a butler who greeted him as Lord Chrysis to the house of Marquis Celestine and guided him to the drawing room, where the Marquis greeted him warmly saying they met at last. Count Chrysis and Laszlo thanked him for the invitation, only for the Marquis's attention to shift to the Dowager Marchioness Celestine, Barbara, who smiled gently and said there was no need to call her by such a long title, and that he should just call her Barbara, prompting Laszlo to introduce himself simply as Laszlo, though Barbara replied that since he was the head of a house she would call him Count Chrysis, leading Laszlo to suggest it would be best if they all dropped the uncomfortable titles, which she admitted he was quite right about, and Laszlo thought it was no wonder she had been able to keep her house together since she was not someone to be taken lightly. After which she cleared her throat and suggested they take a seat, a maid pouring tea and serving the meal as Laszlo observed everything and thought about how impossible it would be to host guests like this at his own place, noting the properly welcoming butler, the respectful yet understated maid, and the overall elegance, when Barbara took a sip of tea and addressed him as Count Chrysis, to which he replied yes, and she asked about Idili, wondering if she was doing okay and remarking that since she was born and raised a noble lady, living as a maid could not be easy, pulling Laszlo back to focus as he thought there was a reason he had accepted her invitation and that she likely wanted to see him a month after Idili wrote back before the Marquis gently stated he would be blunt and explained he still wanted to keep an eye on what His Majesty would do next, but that his mother wanted to meet him, adding that Laszlo surely already knew why, which made Laszlo nod and think about the three realms of power in high society, those supporting strong imperial power, traditional nobles wishing to maintain their authority, and moderate nobles belonging to neither, and how the Celestines were stepping out of neutrality to meet him now that the traditional noble house of Duke Lancaster had fallen, making everyone watch the house of Marquis Celestine, and he asked if that was all right with him, to which the Marquis replied of course, saying he had not changed his mind because of what happened with Lady Idili and wanted to take the opportunity to get to know Laszlo and His Majesty, even admitting relief that Idili had been placed in Laszlo's estate since otherwise his mother would have already kidnapped her and caused trouble, making Laszlo chuckle and remark that he supposed he should be honored they decided to discuss the matter with him first, while Barbara explained she had read the letter Idili wrote and knew she disliked worrying people, meaning things were probably tough despite her claiming she was fine, and that of all places she had been assigned to the notoriously difficult laundry room, stating she could not sit idly by when Idili was innocent and asking what Laszlo planned to do with her if he truly cared about the week, to which Laszlo replied that he planned to let her live in his manor as a maid until rumors in high society settled down, prompting Barbara to glare and ask what about after that, admitting she was still struggling to decide. leading Laszlo to ask how far she was willing to go for Idili, making Barbara pause before answering that if necessary, she would do anything and everything, and telling him to let go of her so she could take care of the rest, which made Laszlo comment that it sounded like she would really kidnap her if he did not, smirking as he said he thought they would get along quite well, Barbara smiling softly and teasing that they said age was but a number when it came to love, but that he should give it up and find someone his own age, causing Laszlo to laugh loudly and think that the house of Marquis Celestine was not a bad place to send Idili to, since neither the house of Count Canyon nor the three prominent houses could easily reach her there, and the emperor would welcome the Celestines with open arms if they joined the nobles who supported imperial power, believing that Idili would likely live a much more comfortable and happier life there. Yes, he was sure she would. Next day at the Chris's estate, Idili was wiping the windows when Linnea suddenly froze in shock and exclaimed, "What did you just say?" "Say it again," the servant nervously replied. "Yes, ma'am. It's a message from Sir Chrysis. He said he will be a little late because His Majesty called for him, so when the guests arrive, he said to serve them tea and dessert first and show them around the house." Hearing this, Linnea's mind spiraled as she thought, how could this be? The knights coming today were Laszlo's guests, but he wasn't here. She had never hosted a tea party on her own before. These were the first guests visiting the Chrysis estate without Laszlo Chrysis attending, and she panicked, wondering if she had copied what she had seen before correctly, wishing Laszlo were here to tell her what to do, and fearing she would make a fool of herself again. Marcia smiled reassuringly and said, "Don't worry, my lady. This is perfectly fine," but Linnea doubted her, thinking how could she possibly trust Marcia and wondering if there was anyone she could depend on, when suddenly her eyes widened and she cried out, "Oh, Mina, go and fetch Idili Lancaster." Mina responded in confusion, "What?" while Marcia protested, "Hold on, my lady," but Linnea shouted, "That's an order," thinking that of all people, Idili would know exactly how to host a tea party. Soon Idili arrived and asked, "You asked for me, my lady?" Linnea hesitated before replying, "Yes, come on in." "You see, the reason I asked you here," as Marcia leaned in and whispered, "My lady, you should just have her serve the guests and let her handle everything. That way, the guests will get to see how you're making a former Duchess work as a maid." "Won't the guests be impressed?" Linnea admitted. "That's right," while Marcia smirked inwardly, thinking how dare she ask for this girl when she was right there, but since Idili was already present, she might as well make her work and take a break herself. Turning gently to Idili, Linnea said, "Idili, working in the laundry room must have been tough. Today, I'll let you be my personal attendant," and Idili bowed respectfully, replying, "Thank you for being so generous, my lady." Linnea then explained, 3 knights of the royal chivalry will be arriving soon. Laszlo is running late, so we must greet them. When we do, she hesitated and asked, should I be at the doors to greet them?" Idili glanced at her and answered, "That's usually the job of a butler, but since there is no butler, what if Madame Bohen greets them at the door?" causing Marcia to flinch and say, "Wait, what?" As Idili continued, "And show them to the drawing room." Marcia cleared her throat awkwardly and commented, "I guess you do know how to host guests," but Linnea ignored her and asked Idili, "Then should I wait at the drawing room?" Idili explained calmly that most knights did not hold titles, and since Linnea was standing in as the head of the house, it would be appropriate for her to come down after the guests had arrived. Linnea agreed, saying, "Yeah, that's probably better," and chuckled as she added, "Then, once the guests arrive, bring out some tea and dessert at a proper time," thinking to herself that it sounded perfect. Idili answered, "Yes, my lady. I'll go to the kitchen to check on the tea and dessert," while Linnea felt relieved and excited, thinking everything would be set up nicely and the problem was solved. Walking alone, Idili sighed and stumbled slightly, panting, "I don't feel too well, but let's maintain composure until the guests leave." After some time, Linnea sat in front of the mirror, thinking it was almost time for the guests to arrive and reassuring herself that she could do this, reminding herself she was the mercenary king's little sister after all. When someone knocked on the door, she called out, "Come in," and Idili entered, saying, "My lady, the guests have arrived." Linnea smiled politely and asked, "They have? Then should I head downstairs now, before leaving?" Idili brushed her hair back and said, "Before we do, if you don't mind, could I have your handkerchief for a moment?" Startling Linnea, who replied, "HM?" "Hold on," as Idili asked, "Where is the powder?" Linnea pointed it out, saying, "Here, AN. This is the flower extract powder that's fashionable these days." Idili examined it and replied, "HM, then please excuse me," as she began wiping Linnea's face with the handkerchief, making Linnea think in confusion about what she was doing since her makeup had already been finished and Marcia had taken good care of her. When Idili said, "It is done," Linnea looked into the mirror in surprise and exclaimed, "Oh, what is this? I look much more plain than before." "Put on some more flower extract powder." Idili refused politely, saying, "I cannot." "With all due respect, my lady, I must say that such a powder is not fitting for an unmarried young lady of a noble house." Linnea jolted and asked, "How is it unfitting? Would people make fun of me for it?" And Idili explained that it was enough for young ladies to show their natural skin, and that using cosmetics to make one's cheeks appear more pink could lead some people to say a lady of such young age was already trying to seduce men. Shocked, Linnea realized why people had been looking at her strangely and admitted she had used it every day because Marcia told her it was popular in high society, then anxiously asked, "What do I do? What if there's an awful rumor going around about me?" Idili grasped her shoulders firmly and reassured her, "It's all right, my lady. All you have to do is not wear it anymore. Right now, you have to host the guests and stand in as the head of the house." Snapping back to reality, Linnea replied, "Oh right." Guests then said, "Okay, let's go, Idili." Standing before the door, she confessed, "I've never done anything like this before." "What should I do?" Idili calmly answered, "Don't worry. Nobles are bound to pay respect to the person with a higher title. Here, you hold the highest title, my lady." Linnea reflected that although Idili was the Duchess she had treated poorly and not Marcia, who had always been by her side, Idili's presence felt reassuring. Idili thought for a moment and smiled, saying, "For instance, you can just look down on them. Think to yourself, I'm the lady of this house, the house of Count Chrysis. Even the head of this house entrusts me to host guests." Everything Idili said eased Linnea's heart, and when Idili asked, "Are you ready?" Linnea nodded, and as they opened the door, Linnea thought firmly, "Lady Linnea Chrysis is here." Same morning at the Emperor's office in the palace, the Emperor of Vesphera, D. Marcus Tuberine, slammed his voice across the room and shouted, "So many people are begging for mercy after committing treason. Count Talon, the matter rests with you." As the butler nodded and asked calmly, "Did they bring up the former emperor while asking for mercy?" D. Marcus replied coldly, "Yes, the nobles loved my father like no other emperor before him. They just missed those days so much, those bastards." Yet inwardly he seethed, thinking that the former emperor, his father whom they missed so dearly, had been an incompetent ruler who cared little for governing, turned a blind eye to corrupt nobles, and lived only for his own pleasures, nothing more than a puppet ruler. And when his father died, D. Marcus had sworn he would never be an emperor like him and would save the empire from its rotten gutter and bring justice back once again. The butler responded firmly, "Those who committed treason should not be forgiven just because they are nobles. There are laws that govern this empire, and there are more than a few people who would welcome a firmer verdict," prompting the emperor to grin and say, "We need more people like that." The butler added that many competent people had gone into hiding during the former emperor's reign, making it difficult to find talented individuals, and expressed hope that Count Chrysis would come bearing good news, to which D. Marcus exhaled and said, "Indeed. I can't believe he went to see Dowager Marchioness Celestine at her estate without even telling me," while thinking that Dowager Marchioness Celestine and Idili Lancaster were far more than friends, their bond as close as mother and daughter, a truth known only to a handful in high society. Glancing up, he asked, "How did Laszlo get to see her?" And the butler replied while flipping through papers, "According to our sources, Dowager Marchioness Celestine invited him. Perhaps Count Chrysis went over to find out what the moderates are thinking." The emperor then pondered that it had been 2 months since Edele Lancaster became a maid at the Chrysis manor, neither too long nor too short a time to fall for someone, and decided he would simply have to hear what Laszlo had to say, wondering how he would make his report and whether he would mention the miserable situation the poor maid was in. Meanwhile, an announcement rang out, presenting Lady Linnea Chrysis, as Linnea entered the drawing room at the Chrysis estate, smiling gently and saying, "Have you been waiting long? I'm Linnea Chrysis. Thank you for making the trip to be here," causing the knights to blush and respond eagerly. "It's no trouble at all, and please let us introduce ourselves." "Hello, my lady." Linnea laughed softly and explained, "Laszlo will be running a little late because he has been summoned by His Majesty," prompting the knights to react with admiration, saying, "Now that's Sir Chrysis, and it's incredible that he gets to speak to His Majesty privately, and of course, Sir Chrysis is part of His Majesty's inner circle." Slightly startled, Linnea suggested, "Why don't we take a seat then?" And the knight smiled and replied, "Yes, my lady." As she commented, "It's gotten a little warmer today," and a knight agreed with a laugh. Sitting down, Linnea thought with relief that the conversation was flowing more smoothly than she had expected, all thanks to Edele. But then she noticed Edele was not present, only to feel reassured when Edele soon appeared with tea and desserts. Smiling, Linnea said, "I've prepared some tea and dessert. I hope you'll like them," while thinking what a relief it was that Edele hadn't left her alone. As Edele poured tea into Linnea's cup, Linnea reflected that this was the first tea party at their manor and the first dessert, but upon looking closely, she thought in shock, what the heck, this was it, as it differed from what she had imagined. Yet, she hesitated and wondered if Edele was right and how the guests were taking it. When Edele served the knights, they stared in stunned silence, and as Edele turned to leave the drawing room, Linnea noticed all of them staring at her and quickly tried to change the subject, beginning with I, only to be interrupted when a knight cleared his throat and said, "I apologize for bringing this up in front of tea and dessert, but could I perhaps be shown to a place where I could wash my hands?" Linnea thought nervously that this was noble talk for asking where the bathroom was, and panicked at the timing, replying, "Okay, then let me call someone too," but he interrupted, "No, that's fine. There's really no need to call for someone who is far away. That maid over there could show us," shocking Linnea as he added politely, "Then please excuse me," while another knight followed, saying he would tag along as well. Confused and flustered, Linnea wondered what was wrong with them, whether it was normal for guests to leave so soon, and feared they were making a fool of her, silently pleading for Edele's help. Edele calmly said, "Please come this way," as the knights followed behind her, one snickering and saying, "Well, you're as beautiful as they say, Duchess. Who knew I'd get to see you so up close and personal?" making Edele realize this was exactly why they had asked her to guide them. Pointing ahead, she said firmly, "The men's room is that way. When you return, I will show you back to the drawing room." But a knight scoffed, "Huh? How am I supposed to find my way with just that? It's our first time visiting this manor," while another added that she should show them all the way, even tapping her cheek and sneering that a mere maid wouldn't dare defy a knight. Edele clenched her teeth, thinking that though she was no longer a duchess, but a commoner and a maid, even a maid did not deserve such treatment. And when the knight boasted about the royal chivalry being the most respected order in Fesphera, she cut in sharply, saying that despite their honored status, here they were harassing a maid in the house of a commanding officer, questioning whether they were truly gentlemen of chivalry and honor when behaving like rogues. When they shouted in outrage, Edele continued coolly, asking their names and houses, remarking she would love to know which house raised such boys, reminding them this was the home of Count Chrysis, commander of the household division, and that harassing staff here was insubordinate behavior, hoping it would be enough to keep them at bay. Instead, a knight trembled with rage and roared that she still thought she was a duchess and didn't understand her situation, threatening that no one would take her side, But Idili raised her hand and declared firmly that they were sorely mistaken, that she would not stay silent, that she was a maid who could not be dismissed from this house, and that she would ensure Count Chrysis heard of this, warning them to stop if they did not wish to be discharged from the chivalry. Meanwhile, back in the drawing room, Linnea sipped her tea awkwardly, thinking that they were taking quite long and silently praying, "Please come back, Idili." Idili said firmly, "If you do not want to be discharged from the chivalry, you should stop right now." But the knight trembled and suddenly shouted, "Why, how dare you speak to me that way?" as he violently snatched Idili's hand and dragged her along, yelling, "I was offering you a golden opportunity, you ingrate. Apparently words won't work on you." Stumbling, Idili screamed, "Let go of me. Someone help. Pipe down. And you call yourselves knights. Have you no shame?" While another knight cursed under his breath, and the first barked at his companion, "Hey, Joseph. Don't just stand there. Shut her up." To which he replied nervously, yeah, okay. "Stay still, Duchess, Idili." "Stay still, Idili," as Idili's mind flashed back in terror and she thought, "Please don't hit me, father." Suddenly, a knife flew through the air with a sharp whish, narrowly missing the knight as he dodged and shouted, "Who's there?" Count Laszlo stormed in, rage burning in his eyes as he declared, "Joseph Oz, Angelo Vallon. Is this why you wanted to train at my estate?" The knight's hands shook as they released Idili and stammered, "Count," while Idili pulled herself free and said steadily, "Welcome home, my lord." Laszlo stepped forward and began, "You," only to be interrupted as one knight hurriedly protested, "No, sir. Whatever you're thinking, you're mistaken," while another shouted, "She's the one who seduced us first. She begged us to take her away from here, grabbing hold of us. How dare she shamelessly act like a victim?" Laszlo turned to Idili and asked coldly, "Is that true?" As Idili began, but was cut off again with, "Of course it is. I could swear on it." At that, Laszlo drew his sword and said calmly, "Is that so? It's unfortunate that I must behead my guests," shocking the knights as one cried, "What?" And Laszlo continued, "You must pay for lying to me," his eyes widening as he added, "How much do you think I heard? Your filthy words have been ringing out in the corridors from the beginning." The knights collapsed at his feet, begging, "We're sorry. Please forgive us this once. We've never seen such a gorgeous woman that we weren't thinking straight. Please take pity on us." Laszlo then asked Idili, "So they say. What do you want me to do?" And Idili replied quietly, "I think it is only proper to follow the military code." To which Laszlo answered, "I don't have all the codes memorized," prompting Idili to explain, "Insubordination and dishonoring the royal chivalry. That means being discharged from the chivalry on top of whipping and fines," making the knights quake as one muttered, "Is that all?" Before Idili added, "There is precedent of a royal chivalry grand master who cut off the right arm of a knight who dishonored his daughter." The knights screamed in terror, "No. Have mercy, please, not that. Edmund. Sir Edmund. Sir Edmund Milton will explain it all." Laszlo scoffed and replied, "Huh, so he's got your backs? Can't believe you're asking for the second in command of the royal chivalry, not the Grand Master. I will go fetch him as you wish." While soldiers tightened their grips and Laszlo turned to Idili, asking, "So what's a laundry room maid doing here?" She panted weakly, I was at the drawing room." But Laszlo cut her off sharply, "Wait, you don't look too Idili," as he rushed toward her. Soon, talk about the incident at the house of Chrysis spread like wildfire among the staff, while anxiety gnawed at Marcia's heart, and Laszlo roared furiously, "How could you possibly let the mansion get like this?" pointing at her as he shouted, "Marcia, what did I say about her status?" Marcia hesitated and answered, prisoner of war," only for Laszlo to snap back, "Prisoner of war? No, she is the prisoner of war His Majesty bestowed onto me. Are you unaware of what happens if something bestowed by the Emperor is damaged? Not only have you been overworking her, you made her do your job and greet the guests. How could you be so oblivious? What have you been doing all this time?" Trembling, Marcia tried to deflect the blame, saying it was Lady Linnea who ordered it, but Laszlo cut her off harshly, "And it's your job to properly serve that very same Lady Linnea." Grinding his teeth, he warned, "If she fails to recover, you will be taken away by the royal chivalry. You are all accomplices, So watch your mouths, as sweat poured down Marcia's face, and she thought bitterly about what Ideally Lancaster really was, dismissing her as nothing more than a prisoner of war sent by the Emperor and resenting how she was ruining the manor. Later, a carriage arrived at the palace, and Edmund Milton, the second in command of the royal chivalry, stepped down, saying, "It's been a while, Sir Chrysis." "I'm sorry we had to meet under such unfortunate circumstances," while the knights gasped and pleaded Sir Milton. "Please help us, sir," Laszlo replied curtly. "Let's cut the formalities and get straight to the point," and Edmund nodded, saying, "I see. Then this is what the royal chivalry has decided. If we were to follow the military code to punish the men for harassing a maid, their punishment would be quite severe." Startling the knights as he continued, "Your request is perfectly legitimate, and so they will be expelled from the royal chivalry." The knights shouted in disbelief. Did the chivalry abandon us? "This is absurd, such an unfair," but Edmund shouted back, "Can you call yourselves knights of the royal chivalry after your crude and filthy behavior? You should be grateful you are only being expelled." The Grand Master was absolutely shocked. Crawling on the ground, they begged, "Please forgive us this once. She's just a maid," as Edmund tilted his head and said thoughtfully, "Now that I think about it, the victim here is the Duchess." "No, she's a maid now, isn't she?" Laszlo echoed quietly. "The victim here is the Duchess," only for Edmund to reply, "No, she's a maid now, isn't she? If it's not too much to ask, I would like to formally apologize to her on behalf of the royal chivalry." Edmund smirked as he said that he would like to formally apologize to her on behalf of the royal chivalry. Laszlo frowned, warning him that he hoped Edmund was not merely trying to get a closer look at her like them, Sir Milton. Edmund calmly replied that his intents were pure and that he was just trying to do the least he could do. At that moment, a knight turned toward him and shouted, telling him not to make him laugh, calling him Edward Milton and accusing him outright that this whole thing had been his idea. The knight's anger surged as he recalled the past, shouting that Edmund had been the one who said that if they asked Chrysis to train, he would gladly accept, and that by doing things this way, they would definitely get to see that woman at the manor. He yelled that if it hadn't been for what Edmund said, they would never have even set foot in that darn house. Shaking with rage, he screamed that he had his doubts, but Edmund had just used them, demanding to be let go. Edmund only shrugged and sighed in annoyance, saying good grief and accusing them of giving Sir Chrysis the wrong idea, asking when he had ever said anything like that. He then repeated calmly that the household division and the royal chivalry worked in tandem, and that if they were interested, they should personally ask for a favor. Edmund went on to explain that they had been goofing off instead of training and gossiping about Sir Chrysis, so he merely made a suggestion, even advising them to focus on training and not the woman, and asked mockingly if he should bring a witness who heard their conversation. The knight trembled and stammered, asking what he meant. Laszlo then coldly commanded that they be taken away, thinking to himself that he knew it, that Edmund had manipulated these fools. The soldiers responded promptly, calling him commander, while the knights shouted no over and over in despair. Laszlo thought that there was no evidence since Edmund had not gotten his own hands dirty in the whole ordeal. Turning back to Edmund, Laszlo added that he thought Edmund should also take his leave now, stating that he would deliver the apology to his maid himself. Edmund replied that if he insisted, then so be it, and grinned as he asked if Laszlo had any other requests. Laszlo answered curtly that he did not and bade him goodbye. Edmund wished him good night and left the place, grinding his teeth as he thought angrily about Laszlo Chrysis, cursing him as an insolent bastard and raging at how arrogant he had been. He thought bitterly that he should have become the youngest ever household division commander, that it should have been him, Edward Milton, who understood the dignity and honor of that title, and that having it stolen from under him by a lowly mercenary was unforgivable. He fumed that it was already unacceptable that Laszlo had become part of His Majesty's inner circle before him. As he approached the carriage, his thoughts continued, scoffing that to make such a low-born bastard account was far too generous of His Majesty, and that he could not believe that gaudy manner was what Laszlo had gotten out of it. Then his mind turned to the prisoner of war, Ideally Lancaster, who was Laszlo's captive, thinking that he had never given her much thought before, but now he was intrigued. Meanwhile, Idili lay on the bed and blinked her eyes, weakly asking where she was. Salia responded with relief, telling her she was up. Idili murmured Salia's name and asked what had happened and when she had gotten back to her room. Salia replied that Idili had collapsed and asked if she remembered. Idili answered that she did, then asked what had happened to those guests. Salia patted her head and said that could wait, reminding her that she had been seriously sick and running a high fever. Idili said she saw, then asked if Salia had been taking care of her. Salia raised her hand and explained that Daisy had been looking after her but had just left to take a little break, so Salia took her place, adding that his lordship had even called a doctor for her. Idili blinked in surprise and thought that this was really unexpected, wondering how he could call a doctor for staff when he did not even allow them to use hot water, thinking there had never been hot water in that house. Before glancing aside and thinking that more importantly, something else was on her mind. Salia apologized softly, saying she was sorry. Idili asked why she was apologizing. Salia explained that she should have turned down Madame Bohen's ridiculous demands, that then Idili would not have been overworked, and that she could not help her when Lady Lin I summoned her. Wiping her face, Salia added that she thought it would be better for Idili to attend to the guests rather than being worked to the bones doing laundry. Idili raised her voice gently and told Salia that she had helped her so much since she first started working there, that Salia had stood up for her and taken her side in front of Madame Bohen, and that she had only ever been grateful for everything she had done. Salia responded that it was just something she did for her own satisfaction, explaining that when you work as a maid, you see many people come and go, leaving for all sorts of reasons like conflict or the work being too hard, and that many people left because they could not handle Madame Bohen. She said Idili was just one more person who had to hang on and survive the day, no different from any of them, and that she wanted to help her adjust, but at some point she thought Idili would be fine with just about anything. Salia admitted she had assumed Idili would somehow be better than her since she was once a duchess, and that besides, Idili would never be leaving the manor, telling herself it was better for her to get used to it now. Idili told her not to say that, saying she had met Salia and Layla, who had been nothing but kind, and had found a good friend in Daisy, and that was what kept her above water, and that it still applied now. Tears appeared in Salia's eyes as she thanked Idili for saying that and suggested they keep it up together. Idili nodded her head. A while later, Layla and Daisy came to see Idili after they heard she was awake. Idili wondered if it was because she had not eaten the whole time she was unconscious, or because of the warm scent of the food, thinking that the food she ate with her friends that night tasted better than ever. She smiled as she picked up a piece and thought that if you could taste happiness, it would taste sweet just like this. 3 days later, at Chris's manor, Daisy told Idili that the 2 knights who had harassed her were going to be tried in a military trial, that they had been kicked out of the chivalry and would be fined as well. Idili said that was how it turned out. Daisy explained that as for Madame Bohen, she had been docked 2 weeks' salary for overlooking the disturbance, and that Lady Lin I was grounded for 2 weeks. Idili thought she understood, then added that she had been gone for 3 whole days, and asked if the laundry room was doing okay. Daisy replied that she had been assigned to help for a while, telling her not to worry. Idili thought that Count Chrysis was probably furious. Daisy encouraged her to be confident and said she would see her when she got back. Idili thanked her, and Daisy said she would see her later. Idili sighed, knocked on the door, and asked if he had called for her, my lord. Laszlo looked at her and remained silent. Idili entered the room, thinking about why he was not saying anything. Laszlo finally asked if she had heard what happened to them. Idili replied that she just had and said she thought the consequence fit the crime. Laszlo clenched his fist and said that maybe it was because he had been living without a leash for so long, but he could not help feeling enraged. Idili thought that his anger was only natural, that he had been dishonored and shamed all because of some maid. She bowed and apologized, saying she should have handled the situation better, thinking to herself that she knew how much nobles hated scandal among their staff. Laszlo looked surprised and repeated her words, asking what she was talking about right now as his voice rose in disbelief. Laszlo's voice rose sharply as he repeated her words, asking what she was talking about right now and what more she could possibly have done in that situation, stating firmly that it was the head housekeeper and Lin Aye who were at fault for being irresponsible. Idili answered carefully, saying that Lady Lin Aye probably did not have any other options, that even for a lady of nobility she was too young to be hosting guests on her own, and that anyone would be anxious and frightened when put in an unexpected and new situation, adding quietly that Lady Lin Aye was not like him, my lord. Laszlo asked bluntly if she was defending Lin Aye. Idili hesitated in her thoughts, hoping, then spoke again, saying that at the risk of sounding presumptuous, she prayed that he would be more lenient with Lady Lin Aye, who was still inexperienced, so that he would not lose his poor sister. Laszlo nodded with a faint smile and admitted that she was right, saying that as an incompetent count he had made his little sister and even his maid look bad, that he was ashamed, and that if he had had a better head on his shoulders, no one would have dared step out of line like that. Idili exhaled and told him that it was those knights who did wrong, not him, my lord. Laszlo smirked and told her she did not need to say things like that, then asked her to first take a seat. Once seated, Laszlo said he had heard she went through a lot in the laundry room and that the workload there seemed too much for her to handle, so from now on she could work in the kitchen instead. Idili nodded and answered yes, my lord, while thinking that she guessed she would not be able to work with Salia and Layla anymore, and wondering what other consequences awaited her. Laszlo stared at her and asked if it did not please her. Idili hesitated and replied, "Oh, what? Well," thinking to herself that going to the kitchen was more or less a promotion, before asking carefully if there were any other punishments besides that. Laszlo looked shocked and demanded to know what she meant by punishment, telling her she was the victim here and that blaming herself was already enough. Idili blinked and explained that that was usually how things worked, that normally in a noble family, even if something was not the maid's fault, the maid was punished so that her employer could save face. Laszlo sprang to his feet and shouted that he must be too dull to understand this, because he did not get it at all. Idili calmly explained that the truth was not important, and that if it did not become the fault of the commoner maid, then the honor and prestige of both the aristocrat employer and the aristocrat offender would be considered tarnished. Laszlo thought bitterly that this was why those bastards were so confident, certain they would not face any consequences, and cursed filthy nobles. Grinding his teeth, he turned his face away and said that unfortunately he used to be a lowly mercenary and was not familiar with such aristocratic conventions, so there was nothing for her to be concerned about, and she could return to her quarters now. Idili thought about Count Laszlo Chrysis, realizing that at first she had assumed he was frightening and cruel, but based on what she had seen so far, he might be more rational than any nobleman she had known. Gathering her courage, she thanked him for showing her mercy but thought that now was the perfect opportunity to ask him for it, and added that the work in the laundry room was even harder to bear during winter, asking if he could please allow the use of hot water for the other maids. Laszlo looked shocked and asked if they had really been doing laundry with cold water in such freezing weather. Idili replied yes, adding that the same went for the bathrooms and that everyone found it difficult to wash with cold water during winter, wondering in her thoughts if it was possible that he really did not know. She then asked if it was not his wish to prohibit the use of firewood. Laszlo shouted in disbelief, asking who would force anyone to use cold water in the dead of winter, saying he had explicitly ordered that any necessities be purchased for the estate as much as needed. He hesitated and admitted that he never specifically said everyone was allowed to use hot water, but that it was common sense, and that he had said it was okay to buy as much firewood as necessary. Idili asked whether the head housekeeper had not even asked him about it. Laszlo sighed and replied never, calling himself the worst employer ever and blaming himself for being blind to this, then promising that he would order for everyone to be able to use hot water starting tomorrow. Idili blushed and thanked him, my lord. Laszlo smiled and said he was the one who was grateful, admitting that if it had not been for her, he would never have known. Idili thought that she was not afraid of him anymore and that right now he was almost cute. After some time, Laszlo issued firm orders, telling them that when they finished moving the firewood, they were to get to work on the laundry room and all the bathing rooms, that they were free to hire more men if necessary, and to make sure there was enough firewood to last until next summer. A maid beamed and asked if he meant it, exclaiming that they were saved and that it had been really tough, while another said she had been seriously considering going back home, and yet another said she could not remember the last time she used hot water. Idili smiled, thinking how glad she was that everyone seemed pleased. Suddenly, Marcia slammed the door open and shouted, demanding to know who was making such a ruckus instead of eating like she ordered, then sneered that if it was not the prisoner of war His Majesty bestowed, accusing Idili of not understanding how hard she was making their lives by chattering away without a care in the world. Marcia turned on Salia and Layla and blamed them, saying that thanks to them, those two poor girls were stuck in a rut, and because someone got on the Count's good side, they were promoted before maids who had been working there longer. Salia asked calmly if she really thought they would be upset over something like that when they were so close with Idili. Layla chuckled and agreed, adding that thanks to Idili, they could use hot water now. Marcia froze and asked what. Layla explained that the Count had come by the laundry room earlier to see for himself and was shocked that they were doing laundry with cold water even in the middle of winter. Marcia shouted that this was the first she was hearing of it. Daisy added that now they were allowed to use as much firewood as they wanted. Marcia turned on Daisy and shouted for her to wait so she could check that with his lordship first. Daisy remarked that Madame Bohen did not seem too pleased and suggested perhaps she quite enjoyed bathing in cold water. Marcia flinched and denied it, saying it was just that since she had not heard this yet, there might be a misunderstanding. Another maid scoffed and said misunderstanding was not a chance, pointing out that Idili heard it directly from the Count himself and that they should just enjoy it. Marcia trembled inwardly, thinking of Idili Lancaster and accusing her in her mind of snitching to tear down her authority, wondering if she still thought she was some high and mighty duchess. Out loud, she assigned Idili to be in charge of the dishes, washing vegetables, and prepping ingredients. Idili replied politely, "Yes, ma'am." Marcia snapped at her to be more sincere when answering and warned her not to ruin any vegetables. Idili turned her face and replied again, "Yes, ma'am," adding that she looked forward to working with her, chef. The chef responded awkwardly, and Marcia thought bitterly about that darn girl. Idili chuckled softly and told the chef she hoped she could learn a lot from her. Marcia's thoughts darkened as she realized that all this time, Idili had been manipulating not only the owner of the house, but all of its staff as well, believing herself to be the only staff member who never had to fear being fired, and vowing that from now on, if Idili crossed the line, she would not remain quiet about it. Meanwhile, at sunset, Linai sat on her bed sniffing softly, mumbling that she bet Idili was disappointed in her too, regretting that when they wanted to go to the bathroom she should have called another servant, and wondering why she did not say anything. She threw her powder bottle at the mirror, shattering it, and cried out that maybe it was because she was not a real noble, then clenched her dress and muttered that whatever it was all ruined. Meanwhile in the kitchen, Idili was chopping vegetables when a maid named Lola approached her sharply and said, hey, she needed a word with her, complaining that she got into trouble because Idili did not wash the cauldron yesterday. Idili looked up and asked what she meant, calmly pointing out that washing the cauldron was Lola's job. Lola raged back that she forgot because she was tired, insisting that when that happened, as the newest addition to the kitchen, Idili should have taken care of it. Idili interrupted her firmly, calling her name and telling her that she should not be slacking off, reminding her that was exactly what Lola always told her, then grinned and told her to try to remember that today. In her thoughts, Idili resolved that she was not going to be a nice, pushover maid anymore. After the work was finally done, Idili sat on the stairs and tapped her thigh, letting out a tired sigh as she said, phew, it was finally all done, reflecting that preparing 3 meals a day was no easy task and wondering if she should take a little break until dinner. In her thoughts, she reflected that for each meal they had to do everything from preparing the ingredients to doing the dishes, realizing that kitchen duties were just as busy and tough as the laundry room. The more she thought about it, the more she realized what a blessing it had been to have met Salia and Layla at the laundry room. As she dozed off slightly, she mumbled that her friends were eating the same food and that she should be working hard, her voice trailing off. Elsewhere, a servant named Bobax handed vegetables to Marcia and hesitantly said that these were all the vegetables she ordered, asking if it was really fine for him to sign there. Marcia smirked and told him to come on, saying it was not his first time and asking why he was being nervous. Bobax hesitated and replied that he had been doing as he was told, but something still bothered him. Marcia cut him off and asked if he was scared all of a sudden, saying there had not been any problems so far. Bobax admitted he just had a bad feeling these days. Marcia snapped back, telling him to forget about it and boasting that she could always find herself a new vegetable vendor, scolding him for complaining when she was trying to make him more money. Panicked, Bobax begged her not to say that and insisted he was always grateful. Marcia smiled smugly and said that was the spirit, reminding him that he would not be getting this much if she were not around. As he left, Bobax muttered that next time he would be back. The door creaked open and Idili, who had noticed everything they were saying, thought in shock that Marcia was embezzling money. She glanced after them and reflected on the hesitant vendor who did not want to sign his name and the head housekeeper who seemed far too familiar with it all. If Marcia had been embezzling the money meant to run the estate, Idili realized this was serious. She stood up abruptly, thinking that this time she was really going to find evidence to prove it. Following Marcia quietly, she recognized the sound of Madame Bohan's footsteps and noted that she had gone to the second floor, likely dropping off the receipt at the Count's office before leaving. Idili reasoned that since Count Chrysis was working, his office was probably empty. She sprinted inside and looked around, relieved that no one was there, thinking it was risky, but the quickest way to get it done was to do it herself. She whispered an apology for sneaking in, my lord. Picking up the receipt, she murmured that this was it, a store purchase receipt, and read through it carefully. Chewing potatoes marked as premium, carrots marked as premium, dried tomatoes marked as premium. Idili frowned in disbelief at the word premium, thinking that all the vegetables delivered had been in terrible condition. She read the total amount and the signature, then realized that the produce was charged far more than it actually cost. In her thoughts, she pieced it together, realizing they were taking advantage of the fact that no one in the house could differentiate between types of produce, and that Marcia had been embezzling money set aside for fresh produce. She wondered where Marcia kept the books that contained her illicit earnings. As she moved to leave the room, Idili thought that people like Marcia always kept records, obsessed with money and unwilling to miss a single lingdon. She was sure Marcia had dipped her fingers elsewhere too, not just the produce money, and wondered where it could be, questioning whether it was in Madame Bohan's room. Just as she considered following her again, a voice suddenly asked who was there. Idili froze when Lady Lin Ai called her name and asked if that was her. Startled, Idili flinched as Lin Ai explained she heard Idili was reassigned to the kitchen and demanded to know what she was doing on the second floor. Idili's heart raced as she wondered what she should do, realizing she had to say something before it was too late. Turning to face her, she greeted her politely, my lady. Lin Ai raised her voice and demanded an answer, asking again what Idili was doing up there. Idili hesitated and began to explain, thinking she should only tell facts that were relevant, then said she was worried about her, my lady. Lin Ai looked surprised and questioned why Idili would be worried about her. Clutching her dress, Idili explained that she heard Lin Ai was punished for what happened last time and that she was worried about how she was doing, saying there was not much Lin Ai could have done at the time and that she must have been very scared too. In her thoughts, Idili remembered how much Lin Ai's hands had been trembling and felt that if she did not say this now, she might never get the chance. Lin Ai exhaled and said she was fine, then mentioned that she heard Idili asked her brother to shorten the period she was grounded for. Idili admitted that she asked just in case he would grant it and guessed that he had. Linai exclaimed that Idili really was bold, saying no one had ever asked something like that of her brother. Idili blushed and suggested that he probably realized Linai meant well, adding that she was really glad. Linai waved her hand and said Idili just did not know her brother well enough, complaining that he was always scolding her. Idili reacted in surprise, but Linai quickly said that was not what she wanted to tell her, then thanked her. Caught off guard, Idili tried to respond, but Linai interrupted and said she had something else to tell her, asking if Idili happened to know Viscountess Emerson. Idili replied that she did and asked what it was regarding. Linai excitedly explained that she was recently invited to a party the Viscountess was hosting and that she even got a second invitation, wondering if that meant the Viscountess liked her, and asked Idili what she thought. Elsewhere, Angela Bliss, Camille's cousin, admired the party preparations and commented that the decorations for this year's party were phenomenal, asking how Camille came up with the idea. Viscountess Camille Emerson thanked her and said she had something even more amazing prepared, telling her to brace herself, then smirked as she mentioned that she invited Linai Chrysis. Angela asked if she meant the sister of that former mercenary count, and Camille confirmed it with a sly smile, saying she was sure Linai would make the party very interesting. Back with Idili, Linai cleared her throat and explained what she really meant, asking hesitantly whether Idili thought she could become friends with the Viscountess.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope this romantic journey made your heart flutter just like mine. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss another love-filled episode. And don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I love reading what you think about the story. Your support means the world. See you in the next romantic adventure.